recognized symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer, the greatest professional wrestler of all time, your friend and mine, Double J, JArrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Oh, howdy, Conrad Thompson. How we doing, pal? Is as you say this, as we record this is Sunday afternoon. We'll be dropping on, what would that be? December the 5th, you're listening to this, but we recorded this just 2 days prior, December the 3rd. It's football season. It's college football season. It's NFL playoff season. My Titans just had a little tough day. We can probably always make a wrestling analogy. A lot of injuries going on with the Titans. A lot of injuries going on in professional wrestling throughout the years. Life is good. Clipboard Joey is trolling away. I'm got a full-on investigation on who's running that Twitter account. A lot of nonsense going on. Yeah, that there's some nonsense going on. Skunk Gate. I love the names that come in. Was that just this past week that the skunk made his return?
It was, yeah.
Anyhow, I don't know, Conrad. Life's good. I'm getting messages across. My screen is freezing from time to time. We're on 1080i high def for you YouTube watchers and listeners out there. I was on 720, but we'll keep powering through, Conrad, unless you tell me different.
Why wouldn't we power through, Jeff? You're powering through into the Great White North. Tomorrow, Montreal, AEW, here we come. Tickets are on sale now, AEWTIX.com. You're going to see Christian Cage defending the TNT title against the rated R superstar Adam Copeland. Also got Timeless Tony Storm defending her strap against Sky Blue. In the Gold League of the Continental Classic, where John Moxley will take on Roosh. We got Swerve Strickland in there against Mark Briscoe. And your man, Jay Lethal, going to take on Jay White. Tickets are on sale now, AEWTIX.com. They're going to do Tuesday and Wednesday. So as you're listening, you can actually go see The Last Outlaw tonight and tomorrow night. And be sure to tune in to Dynamite. But, man, this is it's an interesting time if you're a sports fan. Anything interesting happened in college football over the weekend that you can think of note, Jeff?
Well, let me just think for a second. One thing is for certain, your father-in-law, what a bandwagon jumping son of a gun he is. I mean, what in the world is going on? But I guess the highlight of me over the weekend, and for those college football fans, when the rankings came out, there was, we'll call it just 6 teams in the running. I think you could probably make an argument for 7, but we're going to say 6. And Michigan came out 1, and then came out 2, then came out 3, and the whole world was going to figure out who was 4. Was it going to be Florida State, the undefeated Seminoles? Was it going to be the Georgia Bulldogs, 2-time defending national champion, with only 1 loss, which happened yesterday going into the weekend? They were the number 1 seed. And then you also have that team from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the Crimson Tide. And when the number 4 pick came down, they were going to be facing the number 1 seed, the Nature Boys team.
Mm-hmm.
And Conrad, you are very good. You're just so articulate. You explain things. You have good impersonations. You're fun-natured, quick-witted. But can you just give me a little bit of a sample, just a little bit of a sample, when the entire Michigan room was filled with players, coaches, alumni, boyfriends, girlfriends, cheerleaders? I mean, the whole, as we say in the South, kit and caboodle was in there. And they flashed up there, who is the number 4 seed? And when the crimson color flashed of Alabama, what did you hear? Oh, that's the censored rating.
Some guy in the back realized we're being filmed Don't sell it. Don't let everybody know we were hoping for a bye against FSU. The bye actually goes to Georgia. Georgia was the 5th best team in the country, not Florida State on their freshman quarterback.
Oh, God.
It's going to be, I'll tell you this, I am more confident in Alabama than I have been all season because let's just call it like it is. They ended a 29 game streak for Georgia. They beat the number 1 team in the land. They beat Georgia, and I don't think it was ever all that close. It felt like Alabama, with the exception of that first score, was in control the rest of the way. And I think that team has gotten better and better as the year has gone on. And I know there's some upset folks who were thinking that their team should have been in. And I think friend of the show, Brandon Walker, hit the nail on the head. Have we considered eliminating teams whose coach was suspended for cheating during the season? That would clear things right up. But the dirtiest player in the game, in all his bandwagon affairs, he now finds himself nestled up against Mr. Khaki Pants himself, Mr. Harbaugh. And it's hard times are headed to Ann Arbor.
Oh, boy.
But all you Michigan fans, I want you to understand what I'm about to say. It's not a prediction, it's a spoiler. You're going to, as we say in the South, tote an ass whooping. And then you're going to get a bunch of new sanctions. And then your coach is going to go coach the Raiders. He's leaving. He'll be done with college athletics after Alabama gets done with you. But don't worry. I know what you're going through. And I know it has to suck. But like Dusty Rhodes said about 40 years ago, if you'll just stretch your hand out and you'll put your hand against my hand, you can join the heartbeat of America in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. When Alabama has an opportunity to right the wrong of the season, when Texas, oh, poor Texas. Did you think we forgot about you? I know y'all are going to dog walk the Washington Huskies. This ain't basketball. They don't belong here. Get the F out. This is SEC. This is the big boy table. And the championship game in Houston is going to be Alabama and Texas. And if you were a betting man, would you bet that Nick Saban loses to the same team twice in the same season? Said every Vegas insider. Alabama's the odds-on favorite to win the entire national championship. And yet some idiots from Tallahassee or Athens or Columbus out here chirping from the sidelines about shoulda, woulda, coulda for Alabama. Here's a spoiler. They've only done these playoffs like this 10 times. And all 10 times, a team from the SEC was there. And who better to be there from the SEC than the guys who won the championship in the SEC? On what planet does the ACC champion get into the playoff before the SEC championship? It ain't basketball, you silly goose. It's over for your kind. And if you're a Florida State fan, Lord bless you with your freshman quarterback who threw for 55 yards against number 16. Lord bless you. Georgia is out for blood. That game will be over at halftime. You should have never been in the conversation. In fact, had Georgia beat Alabama, you still wouldn't have made it in. Texas belonged instead of you. So get on out of here, Free Shoes University. Go enjoy your little T-shirts about how you're the real national champions and then burn them when Georgia dog walks that ass. I got it out of my system now, Jeff.
That was just priceless. And you know what, Conrad? I don't often do this, but I'm going to kind of tie all this together that until we came on here, I love football. I love sports. I'm a sports junkie. I was watching girls college basketball earlier today because my daughter, they got a big win yesterday. And so they're going to be playing this team later in the year. So I said, hey, you know what? At the end of my workout, I do cardio. I'm just going to dial in, watch a little of this girls basketball, watch 7 or 8 minutes of that. But I'm saying that I just love sports, but I'm not layered into it like you are, Conrad. And when you enlightened me today, as we were figuring out my Wi-Fi problems again, when you told me 5 plays 6, Florida State is going to get their opportunity to play the Bulldogs. And as I was biting my nails, not really just saying that, in the Titans game, as our punter gets blown out, Derrick Henry, your Crimson Tide, he's got a concussion, Conrad. Levis is our second string quarterback. We're missed it anyway. It is a tough deal. So I start scrolling through Twitter and just kind of running the gamut of it on all things on what's X, formerly Twitter. I saw the statements from the Florida State athletic director, from the head coach. Now, these aren't fans that have the right to say anything and everything. My grandma Christine, she taught me that in the early 80s, they paid a ticket. They can say anything they want. They just need to behave themselves and not get out of line. Yes, ma'am, Christine. But these aren't fans. These are the number 1 and 2, however you want to say it, the AD and the head coach, for them to get on their self-righteous soapbox and just blister the BCS, the committee. I mean, if you really want to drill right down to it, they're taking it's not even backhanded. They are rifling the Alabama and the SEC and everything that goes with it. And I'm thinking, okay, they're upset. I get it. It's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. They're frustrated. They do have an undefeated season. But I didn't realize that they're going to be in a very short 4 weeks. They're going to get that opportunity. Today's message at Long Hollow, my church, Conrad, that's why I'm not preaching here. I'm just kind of tying it to, was on one of the Beatitudes. Meekness shall inherit the earth. And that's humble, self-restraint, just basically bite your lip. Don't try to retaliate. And those guys retaliated with some words, but they're going to have to back that up. When Georgia beats them by a large margin, you think that AD and that head coach will backtrack on their comments and say, hey, I was kidding. You know, I didn't. Well, hell no, man. If Florida State doesn't win, they have to win now, I think, for the head coach, because the committee and the guy from NC State is in charge of the committee. Did you see his interview today, Conrad?
I missed it.
It's good. He basically said it's an impossible job. You're not going to please everybody. Our job is only one thing: put the best 4 teams we think out there.
Then Georgia should have been in instead of Texas or Washington. But okay.
He admitted it was just no way to make everybody happy.
Yeah.
So I get that. But yeah. So let me ask you: you think Georgia and Bama and Michigan and Washington should be the 4, or Texas?
I don't think Washington's any count. I think Texas is going to take care of business.
Okay.
I don't even think it'll be all that close.
Wow.
And then I think Michigan is going to be a favorite against Alabama. And Alabama loves the rat poison. So I think Alabama beats Michigan. Texas just walks through Washington. I think that game will be over at halftime.
Wow. Okay.
Not really. I just want to talk smack. I really want to will this into existence. I want Alabama and Texas in the main event in the college football championship. Yeah.
Isn't that great in professional wrestling? You don't have we get to script it and you get to, it's the beauty of it. And the true sports of the world, they just got a hope and a prayer, or a wink and a wink.
Well, Georgia, I know you don't watch Curb Your Enthusiasm. Have you heard of it?
Yes, Larry David.
Okay, so Larry David has a great friend in the show. And he's like the best friend. And he accidentally starts living with him. His name's Leroy. And eventually he starts to use words like tap that ass. And that's what's going to happen. Georgia is going to tap that ass. It's not going to be close. Alabama is going to tap that ass.
Oh boy.
Texas is going to tap that ass. And there's going to be a whole lot of people upset when I log into my social media. There's just so much whining and complaining and bitching and negativity. And I understand. And as I understand it, around this time of year, it starts to get worse for a variety of reasons, like college football, like pro football. And if we're going to be real for a minute, like the holidays. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people who really struggle this time of year because they think about the way things used to be in their real life, and they think about the family members who are no longer here. My heart goes out to those folks. And I, for one, have been going through a pretty big life change in my real life. And It's been tough, but I found some solutions. I want to share them with you. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. That's right. My World with Jeff Jarrett is sponsored by BetterHelp. And we want you to get the help you need. Right here at the end of the year, around the holiday season, I know a lot of our listeners are like some members of my family. They start to struggle with those seasonal blues. I know I think about my grandmother and my uncles who are no longer here. And I think about just the end of the year stress if you're in a sales organization, what that brings about. Or silly stuff like football and all the other stuff that's not really important. But when it comes to serious business, I want to encourage you to talk to somebody. Therapy can be a bright spot, and all that stress and change gives you something to look forward to, something to make you feel grounded, and something to help give you the tools to manage everything going on. And I've benefited from therapy years ago. I've told the story, I guess in 2006, I started therapy. I mean, I needed to talk to somebody who wasn't in my immediate circle. I wanted to talk to somebody I didn't work with. It wasn't someone I was trying to have a romantic relationship with. I didn't want to talk to a family member. I just needed to sort some things out in my head, in my personal life. And man, it made all the difference in the world. And right now I find myself in a similar circumstance where I gotta sort through some things professionally. And I turned to BetterHelp. I just signed up for BetterHelp.com last week. I've set my first appointment, and I will share how that went here on next week's program. You don't have to do that. You don't have to tell your story, but I'm trying to, just let everybody listening know this is the real deal. It's going to be helpful for learning positive coping skills, maybe how to set boundaries. It's just going to help empower you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for people who've experienced some sort of major trauma. And Lord knows Jeff has talked a lot about trauma with the loss of Owen and his wife Jill, and so much on this podcast. I think I speak for Jeff when I say a lot of good can come from this. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, why not give BetterHelp a try? It's entirely online, meaning it's designed to be convenient and to be flexible and to be suitable to your schedule. I got to tell you, that's not what my experience was in 2006. I had to call around, I had to drive to another county, I had to set an appointment, there's travel time, and who knows if it's going to be a good fit and what that whole process is. I didn't have to do any of that with BetterHelp. Seriously, I was signed up and getting scheduled opportunities once I'd been paired and matched the very same day. Like just setting up the process, going through all the sign up process, you're talking about maybe 5-10 minutes at the most. Then I got an email, hey, we're ready. It was that simple. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, just talking and sharing some facts about your life, and then maybe what you think you might be interested in. They do the heavy lifting for you. They play matchmaker. And by the way, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. How do you beat that? Find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/myworld today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/myworld. And Jeff, I know that we haven't spent a ton of time talking about it here on the show, but I know that you're a big mental health advocate and a big proponent of therapy. What can you tell us? Would you recommend BetterHelp to some of our listeners?
I actually, and the video would probably show this, or maybe not. When the font came up, Conrad, I listened to all your reads on this read today. I specifically dialed in because I just wanted to kind of hear, because I went and signed up like you did. But boy, oh boy, Conrad, we could go into many of the podcast and pull out all kinds of segments on my thoughts on therapy. But in my travels on this side of sobriety, I work with a lot of other folks day to day. And when I talk to, I'll say kind of a new guy that's looking for help, as we say, a lot of guys come in and they're not on a winning streak. I'm not comparing the two, but I kind of tell them, look, if you're going to physically get better, you go to the gym, you start eating better, you do all these kind of simple things to get your physical health better. Well, your mental health, whatever the problem may be, it just doesn't magically get better. Well, how does it get better? The only way it can get better is if you talk about it. and kind of drill down. And I call it peeling the layers of the onion back. And if you're trying to do that with, and I'm not saying not talk to family members, don't get me wrong, but you have to talk to a professional in any line of work. If you're going to become a doctor, you go to people who know how to train you to be a doctor or a lawyer or any kind of thing. I'm just a huge proponent in go to a professional. They know how to help and guide you, peel the layers of the onion back. And, an uncle or a dad or a close family member, like you said, that's what really perked my interest, Conrad, because that's the truth. It's very, very difficult to open up to someone in your family because there's so much context and there's truly a lifetime of relationships which can complicate it. If you get to a professional like Better Help provides, then it's that one-on-one. It's between you and, man, the ease of it now. And I know it's a different generation. You flip up your iPad or your laptop or whatever it is, and you can have that from the privacy of your home and have those one-on-ones. I can personally say one-on-one counseling is a big part of saving my life. That's simple.
BetterHelp.com/myworld. Let's get to it today, Jeff. We are excited to be talking about, I guess, our final look back at TNA 15 years ago. It's final resolution. The main event Mafia is in full swing. We've talked a little bit about this in the archives, but your ratings are hot now. So hot, they're beating WWE's third brand, ECW. I guess this is maybe akin to AEW beating NXT a few years ago. Was this an accomplishment? Were you proud to see that even though it was the quote unquote third brand, that TNA had better ratings than ECW?
And until, shout out Derek, until diving into the research and thinking things through, I do remember us having those conversations, but it was, again, during this time, the creative sessions would be downstairs in the big room at my house. And so we would get, when we would get together, we'd have, the 3 or 4 whiteboards going in the room and have the early morning discussions of things and that. And we just kind of touched on it from time to time. But like so many things, social media and the instant exchange of information and people, I'll call it either going down rabbit holes or just loving to create a lot of chatter or whatever it may be. I think the audience makes and has made so much bigger deal out of it. We talked about it, but it wasn't that big a deal. The thing that we were so engaged with was just, and I don't say it's the only thing that matters, but it is very, very at the top of the list. What's the network thinking? And they were, again, always looking for the long ball, looking for the quarterly, maybe a run over a month or 2 months, but specifically over a quarter. But, we had been trending up and again, going from 1 hour to 2 hours and kind of that I've said many, many times, from Saturday night to late night Thursday night to the 1 hour prime Thursday, 2 hours prime Thursday, that progressive growth. And then we were kind of creating some momentum with the ratings. But the thing that kind of was first and foremost in all of ours, it's what have you done for me lately? And that's the world of wrestling, creative and talent and how they're working together. And, final resolution, the December pay-per-view of 2008, this was, December pay-per-views are always challenging to say the least. But when we kind of landed on the main event Mafia and that got up and running, the authenticity of the storyline, that it was really, it was entirely based off reality in a good way. And I, we all kind of felt the momentum even before that. We've talked about this over the last couple of weeks. It's hard to believe that's been 15 years ago. But with the ratings uptick and the consistency of the ratings uptick, yes, it was, it wasn't the only barometer, but it was certainly an important barometer, and we were pretty fired up about it.
Were you pretty fired up about, I assume it was Dixie, but Dixie's out front. There's a press release where she is inviting the Republican Party Vice President nominee, Sarah Palin, to the pay-per-view. And it's offered that Dixie Carter would personally fly Sarah and Todd from Alaska to Orlando for the pay-per-view and induct her to become a member of the Beautiful People stable and make her an honorary TNA knockout. And the story is that TNA will donate $50,000 to a charity of her choice. And Dixie is commending Palin on breaking through in a male dominated political industry. You know, I know the idea here. She's a PR person as we're trying to court some attention. Were you for this idea? I know that once upon a time you've said, don't talk about politics and wrestling, but we're kind of doing that here. Is it a double-edged sword of we know it'll get attention, but will everyone take it as a tongue-in-cheek joke? Or will some be offended and say, well, if they support her, I don't support them? What do you think?
At the very top of the list, you just mentioned it. Don't engage your audience in politics or religion. It forces their hand to make a personal belief involved in our storylines. And you think, oh, that one storyline is a publicity stunt. Well, that is in so many ways, and we've talked about it over and over here, the subjectivity of professional wrestling, in that, look, this was, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would be willing to bet, certainly today, as I look back over the history, this is not just Dixie generated, and I'm positive of that, but by the Carter family generated. Now, whoever was in the office and bouncing off ideas and thoughts on it, and whether Ross Foreman or whatever nucleus of the PR team, they were all for it. And to create, shout out Dave Green, create a lot of chatter with it. That would be an understatement. That's what they were going for. On the flip side of that is that, I'll just say, Vince Russo would say, it's yes. If he would immediately start thinking, all right, how do we get her in the Beautiful People, and how do we kind of make it fit into our shows? And a Dutch Mantell would say, Jeff, there's no upside bringing Democrats or Republicans or independent parties, bringing that mindset to the table. It can cause damage. And what are we really going to get? Do we really think she's going to come? Of course not. And on a wild chance she does, are we going to be ready to deal with that? So a lot of mixed feelings. But at the end of the day, it's what the owners want, and that's what they wanted. And that's what we went with. And knowing that, again, a PR stunt, the old PT Barnum, the last thing you want is for nobody to be talking about you. So it created some, but I can't say that I was a huge fan of it. But I did like, at the end of the day, any kind of rub that kind of gave the Beautiful People, because they were a hot act. And it's not like they were baby faces and we needed to protect their character.
It's reported on the Torch that there's some heat on Scott Steiner for shooting in his promos and quote unquote going into business for himself. I know you're great friends with Scott and always have been. Do you remember being or hearing or feeling that some folks were maybe not happy with his promo work?
One thing I noticed, probably more so this episode that we're going to get into, and I can't say, I don't know that there's a single episode that you have to take, and that's as you've taught me, that's critics writing, whether it's Uncle Dave Meltzer or Wade Keller or Mike Johnson or Jason Powell or whatever it may be. And now it's turned, it's migrated into, Twitter and Instagram, and anybody can say anything, but they were highly critical of lots of things here. And I think that was contrary to help them, their business, because it's pretty, and I'm not saying we were super successful, but we were having some wins, and it feels like their criticism got a little bit more and a little bit more. It is what it is, but Steiner going off the rails. Look, Scotty is always been, I'll say, hot tempered and this and that. But at the end of the day, Scotty's about business, and his opinion may not align with my opinion or creatives. But if at the end of the day, if you had a adult conversation with him, I mean, maybe not 10 times out of 10, but 9 times out of 10, he'd say, okay, I'll back off, or I'll tweak it here, tweak it there. Cause he always truly did want to do what was best. As long as you were upfront about your discussions with him. But going back to the ratings on that, Conrad, and that's why I was kind of, as we got into this, we were doing 1.6, 1.7, 1.8 million viewers every week. And when you look at where we started, I fumbled through that today about the first quarter of the Titans game, trying to figure out where we actually started in prime time. But that's for another podcast. But we had made some growth here. And that I'm going back to the ECW comment. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing all over the place. I don't know what I tried to find today is, that's what I'm saying is, where did ECW start in prime time? Like, where were their ratings? Where they start, and where were they at this time? Anyhow, there you go.
So Scott Steiner was cool.
Yeah.
The first episode of Impact after a turning point, Mick Foley is singling out Alex Shelley as Shelley and Chris Sabin are goofing off. This isn't happening behind the scenes. This is on camera. And there's some conjecture amongst fans at the time. Oh, this may be because they didn't want to get color earlier in the year. I've never really understood when the authority figures or a veteran, because we saw like Flair do this with Maven once, and we saw Flair do this with Carlito once over on WWE. Now we see Foley doing it here for the Motor City Machine Guns. Does this help anybody?
So, in my opinion, yes.
Okay.
In 2008, it helped me out because you're a much better historian. You've got the depth. Was there a more beloved, active?
No, Foley was it.
He just had a real connectivity to the audience.
Still does, but yes.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, but and he knows how to talk. I mean, he knows how to convey emotion. This was all designed and off screen, or non-story, like whatever you want to say. Mick really engaged himself with I don't want to call it our young talent, but the younger guys, however you want to say it, the front line for as a storyline. So him and Alex had a great relationship. This was designed to, I don't want to say put heat on Alex, but to highlight those two guys. It was by design. Now, did it resonate with everybody? Obviously not. I don't know who made this comment. It's Meltzer or Keller, but it maybe didn't resonate. But it was done by design for sure.
We got Christian losing and being forced to join the main event Mafia, and the entire story of this show is how he doesn't want to be a part of the group. And by the end of the show, he's destroyed by the main event Mafia, and he's sent out. This is his swan song in the company. And Meltzer would speculate that depending on how the contract negotiations went, it could be a build for his return or his exit. Do you remember writing things like this all the time? Like, I feel like whenever you binge a new show, sometimes the writers have to wonder, hey, is this going to get picked up for a second season? Is this going to be renewed? So let's make sure that our last episode is a worthy finale, if that's what it winds up being. But let's also leave some directions to go should we get renewed for another season. Do you take that same approach with wrestling contracts?
Continuity. And boy, we could probably, certainly you with your group of podcasts, the Ad Free Family, what a podcast that would be on just having almost a roundtable discussion of creative minds. I'm sure Eric or JR or Tony or anybody that's been in the business long enough, it's not like by design you sit around and say, I could care less about continuity. On the flip side, sometimes it is very difficult because of injuries, because of politics, because of TV time, because of like direction. Like, do we really need to close that story out, or are we better off promoting to the pay-per-view, whatever it may be? Those are real realities. Sometimes you can slide one of those ideas in there or reasons, and it just becomes an excuse. But I can't say that I've ever been a huge stickler because it's difficult, but it is always in the top of my mind. And in this set of circumstances, we've talked about these in the past episodes. Me, Dixie, and Christian had a meeting at Bound for Glory, 08. And I didn't say it at the time. Dixie didn't say it. Jay didn't say it at the time. But I certainly took away from that meeting, it's over. You know, he's going back to the WWE. He was not going to renew with us. And, you know, I'll call it with our Canadian contingent, several folks, and not just on that, but Jay had come, worked his ass off for us, highly productive, but the time had come, he was leaving. And so we did have an opportunity to, I don't want to say advance the main event Mafia, but have some storytelling that they got some heat on the guy and he didn't get his comeback. He rode off into the sunset. It wasn't going to hurt him at all wherever he's going. That's the thing that some people get so wrapped in. And, oh my God, that's going to hurt me where I go to my next company or this. No, it's not. It's just not. But that often gets in the way of a lot of opportunities that just kind of get shot down, which then gets into, oh my God, horrible continuity. But the continuity situation is not easy to navigate. But in this situation, Jay deal was up and he was moving on, and rightly so, because he had his opportunity to go back and obviously make more money.
The Torch is going to point out that the turn of the hour, Sting is scheduled to take on Jay Lethal and defend the TNA title, but there's a commercial break at the top of the hour and the rating actually drops. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about formatting on the show, but when you've got like a crossover hour like this and you got a world title match, I mean, is there anything that can be done about these commercial breaks, or did the network say, hey, well, these are hard and these are soft, so your hard breaks you can't avoid, you got to do it, but you got a little bit of leeway here, or what's that process look like?
We hadn't really talked about this much. Well, Connie, where do we dive into? A little inside baseball. When in our set of circumstances, and this happens often, we were in Orlando and we're shooting our shows, and you would more or less say, obviously it's a post-produced show, but it's also live to tape. So when you shoot the show and when you bring it back to, in this case, Nashville, and you put it together, and then you're gonna air it, best case scenario is that you want to be in action or on the air about 5 minutes before the top of the hour. So wherever it, anyway, 5 minutes before the top of the hour and 5 minutes after, because channel changers, surfers, people tune in at the top of the hour to watch a new program, whatever it may be coming on, whether it's the news or a basketball game, football game, a sitcom, a drama. You kind of, now I know streaming is really throwing all the rules out the window, but as far as terrestrial TV, you want to be on the air at the top of the hour. But again, a lot of times in wrestling, it's a mathematical impossibility. You bring content back and you can maybe be on the air only up, let's say you got to be in commercial break just because how the show is shot and formatted, and this guy went long or that guy went too short or this package or whatever it may be. You got to squeeze it all in there, and you don't get the optimal segment length on the top of the hour. That can kind of screw things up. Another thing is that the network has full discretion. They can say, no, this break was originally what you guys thought was going to be 2.5 minutes. Well, it's going to be 3.5 minutes because we sold this ad and they want to be in this hour. Oh no, when we actually doing that twice. So you can have a bunch of math. I may be talking a bunch of nonsense, Conrad. I hope I'm making sense, but the fact that whoever, whatever critic said this, that we weren't on top of the hour, it's not a perfect math scenario. Sometimes it's very difficult.
Let's talk about Sting here for a minute. According to the Observer, the top heels are said to be very much into this angle, talking about main event Mafia. Feeling crowd response to the angle is hot. The Sting characterization and not being in on the beatdowns has two purposes. The first is to play off the movie The Godfather, where he watches the henchmen do the dirty work. And the other is that if and when the decision is made to turn Sting babyface, funny terminology since he forgot to turn heel, they can bring up that he never fully joined in on the beatdowns. Do you remember that being part of the strategy?
The one thing that I think rang true of those five guys in the main event Mafia, everybody stayed more or less true. They all came together. It wasn't a big master. You know, the NWO had Scott and Kevin, and they revealed the third guy, and then they were adding guys week after week. On this, they came together in Vegas in October of 2008, and it wasn't any specific catalyst, if you will. So Sting didn't need to. This is where, again, you can be hypercritical, and that's good. It sells their sheets. But the reality is everything was kind of rolling out exactly like it was written. Again, very subjective, but that wouldn't be in Sting's character to kind of dogpile in. So he observed things, but he obviously condoned it. And that's where kind of as we get into things, and we'll get into, we'll call it the empty arena match between Sting and Kurt that happened in 2009. These are all kind of the building blocks of just continuing these five guys that came together, but they all stayed true to their own individual characters.
Let's talk about Kurt Angle here in a minute. But before we do, I want to bring up a little note about the pending UK tour. Meltzer would say there's no talk of doing any sort of filming when you guys go to the UK or even at the Tokyo Dome, even though the Global Impact special you did the prior year was universally praised. But Meltzer says maybe it's a money issue, that there's been some budget cuts beyond just the agents that were let go, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. But we're making other cuts, and there's been rumors of some roster cuts. So there's just some belt tightening. And he's saying that technically pay-per-views are down, but not a ton. House show attendance is about the same. So he doesn't see where necessarily the company's in any financial trouble. And he mentions that the video game wasn't a huge success, but any losses would be borne by Midway, so that won't negatively affect you. But basically saying, hey, you're going to have major arenas and the biggest crowds in company history. You're not filming it. So he just assumes it's got to be a money issue. Why didn't you film it, Jeff? Was it a money issue?
Let's just take, for round numbers, an additional, as opposed to the Impact Zone in Orlando. I think we did 3 major arenas: Manchester, London, Birmingham. I'm not the tour, but however many episodes we could have gotten there in the UK probably would have been an additional, I'd say, well over $1 million to go capture content in the UK. And just the real simple situation is, we'll call it the up and down. And the up and down is roll in a building, up you got to hang your lights and you got to take them down, and everything in between, because lights, basically go up first, then you build your ring, then you build everything around it and all that. So if you were to do that 3 times in the UK versus your fixed studio cost in Orlando, would we have created over $1 million plus in revenue by doing that? No. Did we document it, and Jeremy Borash and some local crews, and we, filmed our stuff for other reasons? Yes. And this is, again, 2008. Think of where social media was at. Nothing where, it's at today. So we just chose not to make Impact episodes in the UK. And as far as the Japan, that Global Impact year 1 was, I think, universally praised. It was but the content was really, really good, and it was different, unique, and everything that went with it. And so we were going to document everything, just not air them as Impact episodes.
We should take a time out right now to talk about all those tickets that you knew you could sell across the pond. I'm sure there were sellouts coming, but man, you never have to worry about sellouts getting in the way of your fun, thanks to our friends at GameTime. I've told the story before. My daughter wanted to see a sold out show, and I didn't know it was sold out. In fact, she didn't even ask me about tickets until just a few hours before the show was supposed to start. Out of habit, she went and looked at one of those other ticketing sites and found tickets on the very last row. And when she sent me the screenshot, I knew, here's what we do. Pulled up my GameTime app, and for a few bucks more, she wasn't on the last possible row. She was on the very front row. I looked like Super Dad, and GameTime made it possible. They can do it for you too. They've got killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. They call it the GameTime guarantee. Boy, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, not just for comedy, not just for theater, not just for concerts, not just for sports, but for everything. I mean it, football, basketball, baseball, whatever you're looking for, GameTime's got it. And something I didn't even think was possible, because I've seen some other ticketing sites, man, they shut down the ability to buy tickets like the day before. GameTime has tickets right up until the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. So if there was some ticket broker out there who got stuck with those tickets, well, he thinks all hope is lost once the show starts. Not with GameTime. You can still snag those great tickets. And I think this would be excellent if there was a concert, because, you know, you're probably there to see the headliner. He's going to have a couple of opening acts. Well, who cares if you miss one of those, but you got the deal of a lifetime. GameTime makes that a possibility. And we should mention, they show you the total price up front. You're not going to add it to your cart and then get a big surprise when you go to check out. We've all had that happen. You can buy tickets with GameTime in just 2 taps. You don't have to call anybody. You don't have to dig through email. Bang, bang. It's in your phone. It's that easy. And you can forget worrying about the seat map. Is this a good seat? Can I see there? They give you the perspective from your seats. Not only that, but you have the peace of mind of not only knowing you got a great seat, but you got a great deal. I mentioned that GameTime guarantee. What that means is you always, and I mean always, get the best price. You see, if you find tickets in the same section and row for less money, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. They're not going to make sure you get a pretty good deal. They're going to be 10% better than the deal from your row. How do you beat that? Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code MyWorld for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the GameTime app, then create an account and redeem the code MyWorld. That's MyWorld. You'll get $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Let's talk about Kurt Angle. Kurt's doing commentary for a match between Scott Steiner and Rhino. And he says on commentary on the program, this gets people talking, quote, a lot of people in this business think things are work, shoot, whatever you want to call it. Jeff and I have our differences, and it's the real deal. I don't like Jeff. I don't like working for him, but I love this company and I love the Main Event Mafia. Now, of course, the internet starts talking about this, but in reality, this is all scripted to get people talking about this. This is the way it's supposed to work, right, Jeff?
Just can't the Easter Bunny still exist somewhere?
It's just amazing to me.
I mean, your father-in-law is a piece of garbage and he likes Michigan. And just because he mad at me and Jay for eating all the good catering, he just wants to stare at. No, I'm kidding. I'll just say the wrestling business is a beautiful thing, and you see it from time to time. And during this time frame, this era, when was this? This was 09. What?
This is the way. This is the way. I'm just laughing because I can tell you're trying to stir the pot with Prichard about Michigan and Alabama. And I appreciate you being on my side.
I'm trying.
Let me just give you my prediction on the final score right now. And unlike the rumor and innuendo, we are not going to clip it out. We're going to leave this in. It won't get clipped out. I think the final score for Michigan, Alabama.
Oh boy.
18-28. I know I shouldn't have done that, but I can't help myself.
You really can't. My
I
goodness.
can't help myself. I'll see him back at the Marriott and I'm going to let him know because you've never been to a game before. Here's what he does. I went to multiple playoff games with this man and championship games. You've heard of, hey, let's beat the traffic.
Yeah.
We've all heard that before. My dad and I used to have a rule. If Alabama got up by 21 points at the start of the fourth quarter, we were out of there. So if Alabama's up 3 scores, let's get out of here and beat the traffic. Ric Flair stood up at a national championship game in the second quarter and said, well, you about ready? No, I'm like, about ready for what? Dad and I are there. We're seeing Alabama, Georgia at the championship game. He goes, yeah, let's get out of here. And I'm like, it ain't even halftime. We're not leaving.
That's great.
Like, we'll watch it back at the hotel. I'm like, no, we're not leaving. He goes, well, y'all rode with me. I'm like, yeah. What are you going to do? We'll figure it out. We're not leaving. So what he does is he leaves in the second quarter, heads back to the hotel bar and watches the rest of the game. He does it. I'm sure if he's on an early segment on a wrestling show, I'm positive he's one of the first people back at the Hotel Marriott bar. And my prediction right now, he won't see the end of the game in person because he already texted me that he's got tickets to the game. And I'm like, okay, you're going to leave in the second quarter.
Where is the game?
Houston.
Okay.
He's doing a Comic-Con. He's like, I'll already be there. I already got tickets. And I'm like, well, you'll probably be on the sideline strutting and cutting, but you're going to leave with your head down because the final score, 18-28. Alabama's going to win the 10.
Back to the topic, and we're talking about
I tickled myself, Jeff. I had to. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. But well, I really was gonna no. The dynamic, back to Kurt's comments.
Yes.
The thing that just kind of hit on all cylinders, and man, it's been fun. Specifically talking about 2008, when we kind of looking at the formation, of the main event Mafia, and you kind of look at the chess pieces on the table, and AJ Styles and Samoa Joe and the Young Lions, they're named in this episode, and we called them the front line, we called them a bunch of different names, but anyway, and then the main event Mafia. But you had Mick right in the middle of it, who could articulate, looking at the main event Mafia, hey man, these guys, they're not just the future of our business, they're stars today. Well, that rubbed the old guys, the veterans, the legends, or main event Mafia the wrong way. It just kind of hit right. And I was, obviously in real life the founder, but I also was playing the role of the founder, where I'm not saying, hey, why can't we all just get along? It was all good for business, but as a executive, if you will, trying to keep the train on the tracks, but Kurt being the ruthless leader of the main event Mafia. Wait a minute, is Sting the leader? But anyway, Kurt being the ruthless leader, he had his his sights set on me. It just worked. In his comments, he would light a fire, and to me, it was good, compelling TV. And I say all that to say, we'll talk about the ratings. There were upticks. I just think there was so much meat on the bone in this story. And we didn't even got to the AJ Styles and Samoa Joe and the stuff we get into in 2009 with the story.
It's announced that Nick Aldis, who is a member of the American Gladiators version of the show over in the UK, has signed with TNA. The rumor and innuendo is that this is a Dixie recruit. I know you and I think a lot of Nick in real life. How does Nick Aldis come to be a part of the TNA roster?
I actually tried to figure out exactly what but it was obviously he was on the UK Gladiators. That was kind of his introductory into it. We were really gaining traction and had been in the UK market for several years at this point. I mean, early Asylum pay-per-views were on. Like Grado will tell you, he watched every single episode and could name it by episode 41 or 65, and this guy and that guy, and then the Fox Sports Net. So anyway, the UK audience had moved along with us in a really endearing way, and as we continue to roll along, and then all of a sudden, I'm not sure exactly where British Boot Camp landed, but we made specific goals to acquire and develop that UK market in so many ways. And Nick looked good, just needed experience. But Dixie, I don't know exactly how it came across her desk, but she was the one that kind of introduced him to what we'll call it the creative team.
There's a big charity show with TNA with one of the members of the Tennessee Titans. You guys raised nearly $100,000 for his foundation. This has to be something that everybody was lining up to do, right?
It's good. Dating back years, I mean, back to the WCW Nitro days when I wore out the Frank Wycheck jersey. I've always been a huge Titan fan, and Dixie had as well. They're the hometown team, and she had deep relationships with different, not just nonprofits, but Kyle Vanden Bosch and her, I think, had actually done some business together. But we did a show and a fundraiser at the Wild Horse Saloon, and it was, I mean, it was it was really good for the brand, specifically here locally, Nashville.
Brock Lesnar in this era is going to defeat Randy Couture to win the UFC heavyweight title. I was lucky enough to be in the stands for that fight. It was unbelievable. One of my favorite UFC moments. And I'm sure a lot of people were curious, since the UFC has such a strong relationship with the network you're on. Brock Lesnar is now the heavyweight champion. Was there ever any discussion that you recall about some sort of crossover promotion, or maybe he wouldn't wrestle, but you would just have, as a favor to Spike, Brock appear on your program?
Let's back up a little bit, because I was going to ask you. I remember watching this from my house. You were there. Where was it?
It was in Las Vegas, MGM Grand Garden Arena. It may have been Mandalay Bay, but it was inside the hotel. It's before T-Mobile was there. But man, it was a crazy crowd. And I mean, they hated the quote unquote phony wrestler.
Big time.
Right as soon as the fight was over, it felt like I was the only guy there cheering for Brock Lesnar. But as soon as it was over, immediate fights all over. Like, I saw 2 fights, including one right in front of me and one behind me, where the police had to get involved because people just could not believe. The only other time I remember a shocking finish like that I was in person for, and I saw a few really fun ones, but Rashad Evans knocked Chuck Liddell into next week over a hushed silence in Atlanta. And that was right after Liddell was fresh off of like the ESPN cover. And Rashad Evans was perceived as being, he's a guy who won a game show to get here. And when he knocked out Chuck Liddell, the guy who's known for taking a punch at the time, you could hear a pin drop. And this was sort of the other side of that. Bigger party crowd, Las Vegas, and people were drunk and rowdy and ready to fight. It was wild.
Watching that live in my house, it's like, did you see Kurt Herbstreit? And
of course, 4th and 31. He was so excited.
Yeah, I kind of did a little bit. I'm just like, oh wow, because UFC was red hot, and I was living that. Yeah, essentially daily with Spike. I mean, just they had traction, and that's why I like. When you look at rights fees, and NASCAR just recently announced, they're going to be Fox and NBC and TNT during the summer, and Amazon component. But I've always, and you too, Conrad, we love kind of looking at the business of the business. But when in these days, UFC had gone from a reality show. I mean, I don't want to say that sounds like it's really putting them in a place where they were just, and they're not a brand new sport, but they had really in their infancy or whatever it may be. And then, in the world, I would just say the world of professional wrestling. Oh, okay. So here's these scripted guys and what you guys do. In this time, it was still a little bit like, little tongue in cheek, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Nothing where it's at today, but there were still a few folks, or maybe more than a few, maybe snub their nose at us in a little bit of a way. And then you have, Brock, he's going to cross over. Oh, he's going to get his ass whipped. He's going to have, to me, that's what I just, over and over. And I've never professed to be some expert judge of talent in the MMA world. But when he won, it was like, wow. he in a lot of ways, man, he's showing the wrestling business. And of course, his background is very diverse. But I thought it was a real cool moment for the professional wrestling industry. So I never knew you went there, Conrad. So anyhow, to the Spike relationship, I had no illusions of him ever doing anything for TNA.
Why not? You got a few guys before.
Oh no, but just because of his relationship with he went through Ohio Valley, and now if the UFC, if Spike wanted it or requested it, I could have seen that. Would I have been open to it? Hell yeah. But I didn't see that in the cards. It would have surprised me if he would have done anything with us. Because at this time, hadn't he basically distanced himself from Vince?
Yes. He's not even allowed to wrestle. I'm not saying he's going to wrestle. I was just wondering.
Even up here.
Brock Lesnar in the Impact Zone with the UFC title, I'd have watched.
Oh, no, me too. I'm not saying this, but for whatever reason, I don't even recall that being
discussed.
And maybe it was because I felt like he left wrestling and now he's in MMA. There's no crossover. That's what I remember. I may be off in my recollection, but that's what I remember.
Elijah Burke, Paul London, Armando Estrada, and Kenny Dykstra all going to be released from WWE. So, of course, lots of people are speculating that means they're going to show up over here, and we know some eventually did. The rating over year is averaging a 1.08 compared to 1.03 from the year prior. So things are heading in the right direction. Tori Wilson, another famous WWE alumni, does an interview and says something like, while TNA has reached out to her, her focus is on her clothing store in Houston. We know that you guys are doing really, really well in the ratings whenever you put the knockouts out there. Was that the thinking for Tori? Hey, let's leverage some of her name recognition and maybe use some of her celebrity to quote unquote give the rub to some of our girls who haven't been on WWE programming?
Like so many different talent that had a brand in and of themselves, is that, hey, we're not asking for a long-term deal, because at the very first and foremost, we don't run enough shows. At the very most, we're in Orlando, every other week. So what is that, 26? So, a 50 show deal would be a max, and we weren't going to ask them to do non-televised, to do house shows. But would you like to come and we can amplify exposure for you, and you scratch our back, we scratch your back. So yeah, that was definitely the discussion at the time.
Let's talk about Christian. Meltzer's going to talk about, will he stay or will he go now? When he writes, they tried to talk him into staying and had a meeting with him where they asked him what it would take to get him to stay. They've even had several of the top guys individually try and talk to him and talk him out of leaving, but he just wouldn't commit. And unless they're doing a secret work on everyone, but WWE sources think he's probably in. I was told TNA would really like him to stay and be the main talker for the babyface side. The belief is that he's getting a run where he'd be linked with Edge, and with Edge's position, that's a spot worthy of the schedule. But the flip side is that it is a risk. In TNA, he's guaranteed a near top position, while in WWE, Vince McMahon, the last time he was there, even though he had his backers in creative, just didn't see much in him. Even though he got over in his promos, he couldn't buy a win. And this is something we've heard a lot, that for whatever reason, Vince was just not sold on Christian. It's even been discussed that at one point it was suggested, what if we just put a blue dot over his face? JR recently said on a Christian episode of his fabulous podcast, Grilling JR, that Vince was never a fan of Christian's body. He didn't like that leaner swimmer look. He wanted mass on mass and didn't feel like he was thick enough or muscular enough. Of course, we realize wrestling has changed and now it's more about performance. And I don't think it's up for debate. Christian is arguably doing the best work of his career right now, present day in AEW. And I would even go so far as to say, if that's really the way Vince felt, he was wrong. But I'm curious, in your conversations with Christian, what was more important to him? The money, the schedule, the push, or was it something else?
I think at the end of the day, it's all about hope and opportunity. And I think that can fall in a couple of boxes: money, He knew that we couldn't match anywhere close dollar for dollar. We'll call it the grand stage. So if he's going to main event Bound for Glory, we'll say that as example versus middle of the card WrestleMania, you kind of start weighing that out. So dollars and opportunity and his heartstrings being pulled with, okay, this could be different this time. Edge is in a different position than when I left. So the opportunity can change. Just kind of the hope situation. What's it going to look like? Again, he wanted to become a world heavyweight champion. He accomplished that in TNA. He was Tampa to Orlando is not a far commute. So he had spent a lot of time at home during this time. So, at his stage, his career, he wanted to give it a shot. And, there's so many examples out there that, you got to go away from a place to be missed or wipe a clean slate or maybe given a new opportunity. He wanted to, again, bet on himself. That's what I respect more than anything is he knew walking back in that door that it wasn't going to be easy, that there was going to be some adversity, but he bet on himself to give it a shot. And that's armed with the knowledge that Vince is going to be Vince for better or worse. He knew that was his challenge. But he obviously had heard some things from Vince and others that he was at least going to get a chance. And he did.
Well, we know that poor Rhino doesn't have a chance. He's going to run out against the main event Mafia 1-on-5. They beat him down, bust him open, and they're putting him in a casket. When we see a shot of you, Jeremy Borash, and Foley talking about it, and Foley says he's been around DX and the NWO, but he's never seen anything like that. And he's eventually asking you, when are you going to wrestle Angle again? And he thinks tonight might be the night to take the house back. Of course, these main event Mafia characters, they're just taking over the show. And Wade Keller is pretty critical of this segment. The way JArrett puts himself on TV with one big name after another over the last 6+ years in an attempt to boost his star power and having it fail to work each time in any discernible way has become a parody of itself. The weekly conference between those two is just the latest. Boy, I tell you what, for your dad to be in such regular communication with Wade. Oh, wait, or is that why?
Bingo.
There it is. Okay, just clicked.
I was going to say, that did click on you. A little bit of reflective of the times. Do you like that shirt, Conrad, that I had on there?
Let's throw it up there again so everybody can take a look. If I remember right, I was like, this is when you were rolling the cuffs up. You still have that shirt in a closet somewhere?
I do not. That shirt, some buttons got torn off of that. You know who bought me that shirt?
I have no idea.
We were in Los Angeles for business meetings, and we anyway, Dixie Carter is me, Dixie Surge, attorney. I'm trying to think what the group was, and we were going, and I'm like, y'all go shop. I'm out. I'll just kind of walk up and down out here, and maybe I was on my phone or whatever. Went in. Oh, y'all come in. And I'm just walking around, and hey, what size shirt do you wear? Anyway, we got in the car to go to the next meeting because we had like 2 hours to kill in between meetings. Walk out, and she pulled out of her bag. Hey, got you this shirt. Well, ain't that nice? It was nice. But Wade, pretty critical. Pretty.
No
well, last episode, 2 episodes ago, there was that line that Meltzer had said something about my market appeal was at an all-time low or something like that.
Yes, market value is at an all-time low.
Yes. So I wonder if Jerry and Dave were talking. No, I'm kidding.
Your pal ODB is going to take over Karen's old show. Instead of calling Karen's angle, now it's ODB's angle. Hey, we're trying things. There's lots of references on the show to the younger talent as young boys and young lions. Some of the sheet writers are critical of that, saying that never works. You're going to invite your old pal Hermie Sadler onto the show. Unfortunately, it's to catch a beating from Awesome Kong. Hermie's always a good sport, is he not?
Fantastic. One of my best friends for 94, 95, whatever it may be. I think he was running some live events for us during this time, but he has always been a friend of mine, but also of the promotion. And when I reminisced about ODB's angle on that talk show segment, you just kind of look at how the timing, time frame of the creative, because our creative process was, hey, that's actually a segment that we can shoot that is storyline driven, not match driven. And I just remember in Orlando, the different amount of shots that we had to get when you hit the ground running. And this is one of those, you can call it a pre-tape, but there were some, yes, there were some misses, but there were some hits. ODB, I'm saying a lot to say what a talent she is. She was one of the unique knockouts that really made it click, because there will never be another ODB in a real positive way.
Let's talk a little bit about the next match we see here. It's Kevin Nash teaming with Kurt Angle to take on Matt Morgan and Abyss. The finish comes when Beer Money comes out and James Storms knocks out Abyss with a beer bottle to help the main event Mafia. I'm sure somewhere Abyss is knocking out a few beers that Ohio State is out of the playoff and Alabama is in, because I think we have another bet that was about that. We'll have to scroll up, but I know Cody Angle already gets to kick him in the nuts as hard as he can one time, but I forget what the Ohio State bet was. We might have to shave his head too. I'm doing a lot of head shaving. I don't know if you've heard about that.
I have.
The third in 4 weeks, as pointed out by Wade Keller, we get Mick Foley coming out to announce that Kurt Angle taking on Rhino. Since you won't wrestle Kurt, the main event will be Booker T, Kevin Nash, Scott Steiner, and Sting taking on Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, and 2 partners of their choosing. And then he says, if the good guys win, AJ wins the world title. Yeah, it's an 8-man tag with the world title on the line. Sting beats Samoa Joe. Joe's not even had his rematch yet. Keller would write, Foley can't hide how stupid that stip is. Totally demeaning the stature of the world title, allowing it to change hands in an 8-man tag. I'm sure when that comes up in a booking meeting, somebody raises their hand. Where were you on it, and why ultimately was it the right call?
As I read it, I'm like, how in the hell did that not get vetoed? In main events, you always want stakes on something, but the world title, an 8-man tag, I did. I thought earlier today, how did that not get vetoed? I do know the impetus of all of this was, and this is something when you kind of look at Beer Money and look, the main storyline by far, and I'm sure you and my man, Mr. Bischoff, y'all talked about it many times with 83 Weeks. Once the NWO angle started going, it almost sweeps everything in. It's the top storyline, but it's so easy for it to become the only storyline. With the main event Mafia, we wanted to be, or I specifically wanted to be very careful that it can't be the entire storyline. You're still going to have tag title feuds and knockout feuds and X Division feuds and everything that goes with it. And it was not always easy because, as you just laid out, the Beer Money situation, now we're getting into, okay, Bubba and Devon, Team 3D, where do they stand? The reality is they're more the generation of the main event Mafia, but as placement and talkers and baby faces and positioning, Bubba and Devon were perfect for, the AJ Styles team. And this whole, again, we're in December. We're not going to have a big marquee singles world heavyweight title match or a blow-off match. Going back to our innate problem, too many pay-per-views, which we could have done quarterly back then, but we couldn't. So we are monthly pay-per-views. Let's give them a main event. And that's where we ultimately, this was the whole driver behind it, to really create main event Mafia versus the front line.
Well, I'll tell you what you got to have in your front line this holiday season: Miracle Made sheets. It's something that Jeff and I are sleeping on every single night, and it's a 1-2 punch because it's silver infused. That's right. These sheets were actually inspired by NASA, but that silver infusion helps you 2 ways. It's thermoregulating, meaning if you sleep hot or cold, now you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. That's going to give you much better quality sleep, better prolonged sleep. It even helps me fall asleep faster. Not only that, you can wash Miracle Made sheets 3 times less than what you've been doing. Let me explain. These silver infused sheets from Miracle Made prevent 99% of bacteria and require 3 times less laundry. No gross odors, no more waking up with stuffy noses, no more back knee. Listen, this is a home run, and who doesn't want to get the gift of luxurious sleep? That's right, not just for you. This makes a great gift to give this holiday season. 99.7% of bacterial growth is prevented, leaving your sheets to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. More importantly than that, though, man, it's luxuriously comfortable. It's a lot cheaper, a lot more affordable than some of those luxury brands you may have seen in a 5-star hotel, but it feels just like those 5-star hotel sheets. I would even go so far as to say even more comfortable because they're cooler. I hate getting hot when I sleep, and if you grew up in the South, you know exactly what we're talking about. Miracle Sheets, though, man, perfect gift for the spouse, the friends, the family, someone in your life that's hard to buy for. You're really gifting. Listen, sometimes I talk about what the product is, and other times I talk about what it does. Here's what this product, Miracle, does for you. It allows you to give the gift of better sleep. Is there anything more important? Is there anything better than that? How great do you feel after a great nap? How awful do you feel after a bad night's sleep? What if you could just incrementally improve that for you or someone you care about? It's a home run gift. And oh, by the way, dude, they're so comfortable and they require less laundry and they're cleaner. Are you kidding? Well, they make it even better than that. These come with 3 free towels. So you get 2 gifts in one just in time for the holidays. Go right now to trymiracle.com/myworld to try it today and gift it to someone special this holiday season. That's right. I want you to get 2 sets, one for you and one to give away. You're going to be so glad you did. We got a special deal for our listeners too. Man, save over 40%. And if you use our promo code MyWorld to check out, you get not 1, not 2, but 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Here's how you know this product is the real deal. Miracle's so confident in their product, they back it with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not 100% satisfied, you get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go right now to trymiracle.com/myworld and use the code MyWorld to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/myworld to treat yourself, a friend, or a loved one this holiday season. Jeff, let's get back into it. Kurt's going to come out and lose his mind that he still hasn't beaten you. He's going to slap Foley, and then out you come. Wade Keller writes, Jeff's music played, and JArrett walked to the ring and said he's had enough. He said as TNA founder, Angle must play by his rules. He said he won't back down and let Angle tear down something he built from the ground up. The crowd starts chanting, TNA, TNA. And JArrett said as bad as Angle wants him in the ring, he wants him out of his company even worse. He said he can't fire him because of that clause in his contract, but he can make him an offer he can't refuse. JArrett said at final resolution, he will face Rhino. And if he beats Rhino, he gets his wish to face him again. But if he loses to Rhino, his TNA contract is null and void, and he's gone from TNA for good. JArrett offers a handshake. Angle slaps JArrett. JArrett, who looks like he's not getting enough sleep these days, smiled, and Rhino surprised Angle with a gore. This is the show ender, and it's a great way to end the show. A cool angle. What'd you think of the execution?
You know, when you look back on Kurt's entirety of his career, it's so easy to kind of, like when he rapped, there's the rapping or playing the Austin segments, the Shawn Michaels segments, the WWE segments, and even in TNA, he did, I don't want to call it comedy, but he could often do stuff that you would think an Olympic gold medalist would not be doing this because he's such a well-rounded performer. But I'll call it the pissed off, dialed in, maybe where Kurt convinces his audience that he may have a short trigger or I don't want to say a screw loose because that's like he's off the rails, just super dialed in, I think is the best way. I think that's the most money making Kurt there is. And when he's dialed in, not screaming and hollering, but really matter of fact. I just think that's the best moneymaker version of Kurt, and this was what he did. And he is to me, an incredible heel. He's so believable and so dialed in, and that's hard to do because in this day and age, well, in any day and age, you can graduate over into a very likable, kick-ass baby face. Kurt knew how to have the mannerisms just enough that he had an arrogant smug about him, but that to me is money.
The show is doing a 1.1 rating, and Meltzer or Wade would actually say that Mick Foley coming into the company hasn't been able to sustain an increase in viewers. I got to tell you, reading that back, it feels like, how fair is that? Like, realistically, did you think people were going to watch a program because of who the general manager is? Like, I know that he can be an important part of the television show and he can certainly contribute, but never have I ever said respectfully, I wasn't going to watch that show. But now that I know old so-and-so is the GM, like, I was never out on SmackDown, but they announced it's Teddy Long and I'm back in. Like, that doesn't work, right?
Oh, Conrad, it's kind of make and we will text Inside Baseball. I don't know how many times over the last 3 or 4 years I'll text Conrad and say, don't you just love the wrestling, RASSLIN business?
Yes.
It's kind of what makes the world go around, that you can have a, in quotes, respected journalist make a comment and say, that damn Mick Foley didn't get the numbers up. You're like, you're really going to put it all on him or off him? And yes, there is the occasions when Cena's added to a card. I'm just pulling that out. I remember a Laredo show where all of a sudden, boom, he starts selling tickets immediately. So there are people that instantly move the needle. But when, and that goes not just tickets, but ratings. But in our set of circumstances, like you just said, as the general manager, I know internally as a company, and I said it over and over and over, even in that late 2009, when we were, before Hogan had come on board, I was very clear to Bob Carter, nobody is going to make that needle pop off the scale. That's just it. That's not going to happen. But are we going to have positive growth and get a return on our investment? With Mick, we absolutely did.
Let's talk a little bit about some rumor and innuendo. It's reported that Masahiro Chono wants the team with Kevin Nash at the Tokyo Dome, and he would like to become a member of the Main Event Mafia. Is this on your radar? Why doesn't this happen?
Well, I don't know exactly why it didn't happen. Kevin probably, I know Kevin, and we're going to pay him enough to go to Japan.
Right.
But hearing little things like this, you go, okay, it's clicking. Chono is watching. And again, you kind of put those 5 guys together. It was a box office attraction package that was put together. And, our relationship with New Japan in these days was super healthy. And hell, I would have loved to have seen it happen.
Let's talk a little bit about something else I know you would have loved to have seen. Oscar De La Hoya's pay-per-view numbers.
Oh,
I bring this up because Oscar had a fight on pay-per-view way back in 2007, and it was against Floyd Mayweather. So the prior year on Cinco de Mayo, Oscar and Floyd set all kinds of pay-per-view records. They'd sold 2.4 million fights on pay-per-view. And a lot of that was because of the 24/7 countdown show that HBO put together. They got people emotionally invested in Oscar De La Hoya. And more importantly, this young guy who was never really a draw on pay-per-view, who created basically a wrestling character, Floyd Money Mayweather, now throwing cash at the camera. But that fight was such a huge juggernaut success. Oscar's going to fight the next year on December 6th, 2008 against Manny Pacquiao. For years and years, people had clamored to see Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather. Well, Oscar got them both first before they got each other. And I'm bringing this up because that fight is one day before your pay-per-view that we're talking about here today. And the result of that fight, no, it won't be 2.4 million, but it is 1.25 million. A huge pay-per-view. Now, normally, I think most of our listeners would say, yeah, but boxing and wrestling, is there that big of a crossover? I think on the super fights like this, there is. So you got a few things going against you here. On the one hand, it's Christmas time. So families are on a budget. They got to make some selections. And now, secondly, you're going to have, if you buy both, two big pay-per-views. The boxing fight cost a lot more than your pay-per-view did on the same billing cycle. Whew. But these things, they're negotiated way in advance, and you're told to avoid boxing and you're told to avoid WWE. Is this just really bad timing for the pay-per-view? When you find out Oscars the night before, do you think that's going to have an effect? Or did you not think that at the time?
Yeah, you just said it. Once it gets out of, I think there's a boxing bubble, and I think there's even today, I think there is a UFC bubble, a boxing bubble. I think, when you look at UFC, and now Bellator's gone away and PFL and all that. So, outside of UFC, it's really hard to get traction over there. But for us, again, and like our audience listening to this today, and yes, there's some folks that are lifers like me and you, Conrad, but to live in a world that you had In Demand 1 and In Demand 2, you didn't really have a ton of options to get on cable and satellite pay-per-view, in that we had to put in our dates, and we had to go. WWE got first choice. Obviously, it created the most revenue. So we had to take, a Sunday, and I'm assuming this would be early December, because you don't want to go right up against Christmas, and you don't want to go Christmas week. Hell yeah, it was really, really hard. Where was it? Oh, Conrad, the other thing I was going to say was, what year in your Google machine did HBO Hard Knocks start?
That was the one the Ravens were there. So 0102.
So 02, and then UFC storytelling. So to me, to sell sports or / sports entertainment, the little docu-style, not a reality show, but, to me, Hard Knocks was all about promoting the NFL in a different way. But Mo Money and De La Hoya and 24/7, the different ways of selling content. I just think where it was then and now, you kind of different look at things in shorts and reels and the YouTube videos, and you just kind of look at professional wrestling, boxing, MMA, all of it, just how to, lack of a better word, it's what it is, selling a fight. Did Mayweather, did he really break the mold? Is he and I'm talking about as a single talent. Reason I asked about Hard Knocks, that was a team, and that was really a league promotion. I'm talking about an individual combat sports dude. Is he the OG of it?
Yes, no doubt.
Okay. I know you would know better than me. And he's still living off Mo Money doing it.
To this day. There's also a change here. We're going to change the name of the TNA Originals to TNA Frontline. Meltzer would say, you guys even kicked around the idea of calling it Team Ecstasy. What? That's not right.
I have a feeling that probably was a tongue-in-cheek because of X Division.
I get it, but shit, why don't you have Team Weed, Team Marijuana, Team Cocaine, Team Heroin?
I'm saying, like, did you guys? No, I think that was probably a tongue-in-cheek. But let me ask you, Conrad, because there was a lot of discussion that Team Originals doesn't do it right, and you can't really put somebody in there that's, wasn't here from the beginning. There was all
it narrows it. I agree. It narrows it.
Yeah.
I do. I think when you say original, it sounds like they had to be there
from
in
day
Huntsville.
one.
Yes.
Okay. I got
Versus front line is this is our, like war. We're at war. That's our front line. I
okay.
get that.
That was the discussion that I wish I could remember who took what sides, but I was obviously going to have to settle the tiebreaker. But there was a lot of discussion about that no, it needs to say, we don't need to change it. AJ's an original. He's the face of it. And well, Joe didn't really get here till 05 or whatever year it was. So how can he be an original? I mean, there was a lot. And I'm like, okay, they're really overthinking it, but man, okay, they've got it. But because we changed their name after we had come out and Mike and Don had called them the TNA Originals. Well, anyway, healthy discussion. That's a little inside baseball of a creative room, and lots of time was spent on that topic.
Something else that makes a lot of sense, and I got to give you and everybody involved high fives. We've all seen there's been a lot of multi-man matches on these shows. Sometimes there's like, hey, there's 6 guys, there's 8 guys, and sometimes I'm like, man, this is just too much of the good stuff. And then I read this and I change my opinion.
Oh no.
One of the reasons there's so many multiple person matches on pay-per-views, which nobody ever gets over with, and usually just a bunch of guys who've been running hard on a treadmill going nowhere for years, is because Dixie Carter doesn't like the idea of paying guys who aren't working. So they do what they can to make sure that everyone with a minimum works. Listen, I understand that totally. To use a sports analogy, it's sort of like, hey, if we drafted this quarterback first and we're paying him all this money, we got to make sure he plays. I get that. And I also know on the other channel, everybody wants to be on WrestleMania. And maybe that's why they would do these big battle royals and the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. You're just trying to get as many of those guys on the show as you can. That makes me change my opinion about all these multi-man matches. Instead of me being critical and saying, oh, this won't be a good match. Yeah, but you're taking care of your roster.
Yes. And also, I think when you get even a 6-man tag, kind of by design, you're highlighting more guys, and yes, and taking care of your roster. And I don't know exactly, don't want to put words in your mouth, but you can also create finishes that are cleaner, if you will, but less damaging. And I'm not saying wins and losses are damaging, but anyway, there's a lot more options. And I've said it many times on here. In the Asylum days, I think starting a show hot, when people dial in and I'll call it kind of a casual viewer. If you start with hot action and a lot of action, I think there's time to get your audience engaged by, oh, let me sit and watch this. And then you can kind of hear the narration coming up tonight, this and that, and whatever it may be. I think it's a good way to engage your audience, TV and live, early in a show, not necessarily just first, but early.
Let's talk about the Turkey Bowl. It's an annual Thanksgiving tradition. It's upon us here. What do you remember about this concept, and were you a fan of it, or did you know, hey, some episodes are better than others? We just got to service the television.
From a creative perspective, when you write 52 shows a year, and as long as you keep the episodic nature week to week, having a show, which our show aired on Thursday nights in the United States, having a show fall on U.S. Thanksgiving and not engaging the Thanksgiving tradition, and people are at home, they're either about to eat dinner, just got done eating dinner, but it's all content that's on U.S. television is, John Madden with the big turkey leg and the parade and all that kind of stuff. Yes, I was a huge fan of engaging it and having a little fun with it and not being so like on Thanksgiving shows. You don't have to give them blood and guts. Give them maybe a little bit more entertainment value, because hopefully you're going to have some folks sitting around with families gathering together. You're probably going to have some non-wrestling fans. So try to engage them with entertainment as opposed to in-ring content.
The main event Mafia are trying to get Team 3D to join them. And the Turkey Bowl comes down to Alex Shelley versus Sheikh Abdul Bashir. And Rhino and Shelley are interviewed right before Lauren's asking Shelley about his chance to win the $25,000 in the turkey match. And Shelley says, maybe buy AJ Styles a personality. No, not enough money. Maybe he could buy Samoa Joe a singlet. No, you can't buy that much material at once. And Wade would say, TNA insists on demeaning their top baby faces. I don't get it. Shelley then said they could buy Foley a new wardrobe. Would it kill him to dress like a grown-up for once in his life? He looks like the CEO of bum fights. What do you think of, burying the baby faces like this, buying a personality, wearing a singlet? I don't know. Does that work? Does that draw money? Is that cool or no?
Wade's words are burying a top baby face. To me, Alex Shelley is not part of the main event mafia, not part of the veterans, but he is a part of that, we'll call it youth movement or the AJ Styles front line. But again, it spins them out of the front line, and they're basically smart ass, smug, alt rocker. It set them apart. Going back to the Mick Foley in-ring, give those guys a personality, because their in-ring stuff, I mean, to this day, they're still tearing the show. I mean, those get flat out. They always have had. Yeah, when guys are put together, you never know what kind of chemistry they're going to have. Alex and Chris, to my recollection, from day one, had a very, very, very unique chemistry that always worked. Okay, so then how do you develop their characters? Look, you're not going to hit grand slams every time, but Mick Foley brought it out of them. This kind of verbiage when they're kind of taking shots. Again, it definitely defines them as antagonists. I won't say heels, but as antagonists.
We know that ultimately Shelley loses, refuses to put the suit on. Foley makes him.
Yep, here comes Mick.
And says, if you don't, you're fired. So he does it, flips him off. Foley hits him with a double arm DDT and says, have a nice day. Nice little finish to the segment. The main event segment features Team 3D ultimately turning down main event Mafia, instead opting to join the front line. Turns out they're going to be the partners for AJ and Samoa Joe. And the rating for the show, as Meltzer describes it, was beyond phenomenal. The show does a 1.12 rating. That's 1.6 million viewers on Thanksgiving. It's one of the highest levels of viewership for any show in the history of Impact. It's pretty crazy to think that you guys were able to do that. But I guess, hey man, people are home after Thanksgiving. It's a good time. You made the most of it.
And that picture that was just shown, the little nuances, Bubba and Devon in a suit and tie, very main event Mafia like, and again, great talkers, specifically Bubba, can just tear the house down. And I knew that his verbal skills versus main event Mafia was going to be money. So it was a very well executed segment. And that rating was nice on Thanksgiving.
It's reported in the Observer there was hope that Frank Trigg is going to be in the corner of Kurt Angle. It doesn't come together. Midway is delisted by the New York Stock Exchange for being under $1 a share for over 30 days. And I think TNA probably wound up being owed money from Midway when that company ultimately collapsed. Do you remember?
I remember having conversations, not exactly at this time we heard that, but we were going to get our money, and we got the lion's share of our money. I know that it was a non-issue in Dallas. It wasn't a big payable on our, and there were, when I really got into the hood in 2012, I mean, there were payables that went back and accounts receivable and payables and all that. But Midway was never a enormous line item to my knowledge.
Let's talk about an enormous line item in a friend of ours' life. Makes the Observer. The biggest news of the past week is the firing of Bruce Prichard, a backstage producer who's been around wrestling since he was a teenager, working out of the Houston wrestling office for Paul Bosch. Pritchard, best known for his late 80s, early 90s run as Brother Love, came to the WWF in 1987 with Joel Watts, right after Watts sold Mid-South Wrestling to Jim Crockett. From a creative standpoint, he was for years one of the most influential people in the company. as for years, the inner booking circle was Vince, Pat Patterson, and Bruce Prichard. He was fired in 91 and worked for Global Wrestling. He was negotiating with WCW when Patterson convinced Vince to bring him back in 93. It was actually 92. And he's been with the company ever since. Prichard is someone that few in the company would speak highly of, constantly accused of playing political games that everyone saw through, but seemed entrenched in power since he'd been close to Vince for so long. He was on good terms with Jeff Jarrett because both men shared a common struggle with their wives having long battles with cancer. Although Prichard's wife is in remission, Prichard took the death of Jill Jarrett a couple of years ago very hard, to the point those in the company were afraid he could go off the edge. So I know you guys spent some time together during all of your stints in the WWF, and I know you had the real life commonality of having a wife struggling with cancer, and thankfully Stephanie just celebrated her birthday as we're recording this a week or so ago.
Right on. Praise God.
Glad she still beat it and doing her thing, but this has to be somebody that's on your radar. I mean, I know that you're making budget cuts with agents and things like that, but you saw how he produced television. You knew what he was capable of, but you also read in the Observer there where he was not well liked. And I know that some of that is just politics and sour grapes and blah, blah, blah. What'd you think when you heard Bruce Prichard out at WWE after all that time?
I don't know if I've ever almost give you my original set point on Bruce. Anyway, in 1980, I'd have to Google it, 88, 89, 90, Tom Prichard came into the Tennessee territory, and then he went out to Texas. And so me and Tom became very close. I mean, real close, riding partners, rode together every day. And Tom, a few years older than me, was seasoned, had worked territories, worked San Antonio, worked for the Fullers, he was seasoned. And he helped me probably more than he'll ever know. And I've thanked him, but I mean, more than ever know. But I got to know Tom. You ride up and down the road, the guy, day after day after day. And in the Tennessee territory, we did about 3,500 miles a week. So that's a lot of car time together. And I got to understand, about his brother Bruce and his background. And then how many brothers were there originally, Conrad? 5? I think 5.
Yeah, sounds right.
Anyway, so just the different siblings and everything like that. So that's my original first time I've ever heard the name Bruce Prichard. And then, we went out and did the Dallas thing and all that. And then we came home, and then Bruce was a part of Global. We were long gone from that, but then start with WWF and the Double J character. And, I'm informed Kerwin Selfies, he's the director, and Bruce Prichard to come to produce it. And so then I meet Bruce, and I don't have to tell you, Conrad, you know better about anybody in the professional world how easy Bruce is, but also how professional and how productive. So he produces the first Double J vignettes. And look, I won't continue into this whole time, but that's kind of the original point. And then as I'm working there in 93 through 96, and then back 97 through 99, it's very obvious to see he's a Vince guy through and through. Vince obviously not just liked him, but thought very highly of him because of the position he was in. And I hear this in 2008. I was shocked, knowing by 2008, I left there in 2000, that company isn't anywhere remotely resemble what it was 8 years ago. And of course, they had gone through, the WCW situation and then come out of that. And, there was a lot of change and turnover and all that. I still couldn't really wrap my head around, wait, they let him go? They've gone separate. Conrad, to say that it surprised me would be an understatement. And I immediately always thought about executives or wrestlers that had spent any time. And then by 2008, he had been there, 20 something years. And it company had been public. I was going to say, I don't think Bruce is really going to show any interest in us right now, at least for the foreseeable future. Would I have liked to have had him? Well, of course, that came to light in 2017. But at the time, I'm going, I ain't chasing him. His price tag is going to be way up there. That was my first thought.
Well, I'll tell you what, the price tag is not going to be way up there with our friends at Blue Chew. We want to get your cock so hard just in time for the holidays. We're passing out free boners. That's what we're doing. You're going to be talking about stuff in a lot more than stockings or turkeys. We're talking about stuff in the old household. That's right. Give that old gal a trip around. She'll be glad she did. Thanks to your friends at BlueChew.com. Viagra, Cialis, Levitra. It's all chewable. How about that? And at a fraction of the same cost. That's right. Same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but chewable and at a fraction. What's better than cheaper hard-ons? Nothing. Well, free hard-ons. Stay tuned. I'll tell you how to get one. Here's the way it works, y'all. If you haven't already, go to BlueChew.com. Don't let it be a blue Christmas. Make it a Blue Chew Christmas. You'll consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within a few days. A discreet package will show up because it's going to be prepared and shipped directly to your door, and you can feel good about it because it's made right here in the USA, and it's good for what ails you. You get to skip the doctor's office. You get to skip the awkward conversation, and there's no waiting in line at the pharmacy. And by the way, this is not just for guys who have a problem. This is for guys who like nostalgia. They like the way it used to be. They like remembering and feeling like they were 17 again. They're looking for that 5-star review. I'm telling you, this is what the person in your life really wants for Christmas. Spend some quality time together. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. Special deal for our listeners. Check it out. Free hard-ons. That's right. Try Blue Chew free. And use our promo code MyWorld at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is MyWorld, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. So, Jeff, we know eventually Bruce is going to come work with you. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the Go Home Impact for Final Resolution. It's the most viewed episode ever. It has a 1.2 rating, average viewership of 1.8 million. We thought last week was great. On Thanksgiving, we were up 11.1% from that Thanksgiving episode. In hindsight, all that naysaying from Wade Keller about Mick Foley, I don't know about that. Do you think the main event Mafia is the draw, or are people thinking any of this Sarah Palin publicity stunt has anything to do with it? I bring it up because this Go Home episode is built around all hail the governor. And the tease throughout the show is that she's going to be showing up. The beautiful people who we know are ratings juggernauts are all over the show. They're even going to help Booker T defeat Samoa Joe in a Legends title match. And it's actually the only match in the entire first hour of the show. So we're leveraging this Palin stuff in a big way. She eventually has a body double or an impersonator show up, and the beautiful people are falling all over themselves. The woman who's playing Sarah Palin is Daphne from WCW. I just can't believe that this is the highest rated episode. What do you make of this?
Oh, Conrad. This is the uniqueness of it, because if you would have done the following week formatted this way, you wouldn't have got, to me, the same returns. But you kind of touched on it. One match in the first hour. So obviously you have a lot of backstage stuff, a lot of talking stuff, all that kind of stuff. But it's the ebb and flow that it is in so many ways. Professional wrestling, it's got to be a variety show. If it's formulaic, if it's cookie cutter, if it's people tune in and we deliver what they expect, there's just not that sense of excitement and just, it's, there's a couple of shows over the last couple of years that I would get in and always, but that Ozark, to me, I don't know why that popped in my brain. They had some cliffhangers and episodes in that show that you go, damn, that guy just got killed off. I thought he would be on the next couple of years, but surprise. And I don't want to say shock, because then that can go down the wrong rabbit hole. But the kind of mixture of all hail to the governor, and we've got Daphne playing Palin, and the beautiful people were established, and those girls, I don't know if this was peak, but it's right in there. They were ratings draw, but you also had good old badass Billy Gunn playing the role that he plays great. But our foundation was the main event Mafia, and we had been delivering. The week before, you had Team 3D, who were established tag teams. They put their, they drew their line in the sand. So now we know they're kick-ass baby faces. They're going to be opposite of the main event Mafia, and you always want to have that balance, heels versus baby face. Who's, I think it was just a complete mixture of momentum. Going back to what you also said, Mick Foley, are you really getting ROI? Well, Mick has kind of been narrating in a lot of ways. People have tuned in and got to really get in Mick's mind as he's trying to make TNA successful. It was a mixture, Conrad, in so many ways. But this specific episode, and I just got to say, in a lot of ways, watching these episodes, you understand that you can't do this every week. But a good change of pace is exactly what you need from time to time.
Let's talk a little bit about one of the more insane tag matches you'll ever see. Just think about this. Awesome Kong is going to team up with Scott Steiner. What? They're going to take on Christy Hemme and AJ Styles. They go 8 minutes. AJ helps Christy hit a DDT on Kong and pins her. Can't believe that's a real thing. Abyss is getting drunk with beer money.
God.
I thought he was a monster, but apparently he likes drinking. He's going to kiss Jackie, and then he's going to ask if he's not a virgin anymore. But anybody who goes this deep with Burrow needs to be drinking and is clearly a virgin. Kurt has his go home promo about his opponent at the show. Rhino. Nope, actually, it's about you. Why? I don't know. But here's what the Torch wrote. Angle walked out to the ring and immediately asked Jarrett to come out. Jarrett walked out to his intro music, holding his signature guitar in his hand. TNA said Angle wants another shot at Jarrett so badly, he didn't hesitate putting his career on the line against Rhino. He told Jarrett that the fans are going to enjoy themselves tonight and celebrate that this may be his last impact ever in TNA. And Jarrett smiled wide and said, because the more you celebrate, the more focused I become. It's not a normal kind of focus. It's a sick, twisted, demented focus. He said when he trained for the Olympics, he was an animal, and all he did was think about winning the gold medal. And now his focus is on one thing, Jeff Jarrett, and he's more focused on him than anything in his entire life. He said about 2 years ago when I signed with TNA, and man, they've done nothing but butt heads ever since. Says it's well known. It's all over the internet and the newspapers. And he said he's come to realize that Jarrett is jealous of Angle's success. He said he dodged him every step of the way so he wouldn't have to get in the ring with him. But when he finally gets him in the ring, Foley screws him at Bound for Glory. And that's why he's here tonight, to tell everybody it won't happen again at final resolution. He's going to destroy Rhino and taste his blood. And then he vowed to take Mick Foley, quote, I don't care how crippled he already is, but I'm done with him. I'll make sure he's sucking air through a respirator. Oh man, I know you're big on story, and there is a story here, and we know there's stakes for the match, and that involves you, but it's not really about Rhino. That's sort of the backdrop for what's really happening with you and Kurt. What y'all think of this performance and this segment here on the show?
When I went back and the reviewing, this would really be a fantastic TV. If we were talking about this as the main event of an episode of Impact,
yes,
you would have gone, okay, I can see that. As opposed, we're doing monthly pay-per-views, and so this is a semi-main event for the monthly pay-per-view. It feels just not cool because of what you just said. The story's Jeff and Kurt, and we're using Rhino as a fantastic vehicle to get there. If it's on TV versus pay-per-view, it's okay with it. But we didn't really have that luxury. And we've said it so many times on this pod, that the business format, we were, on the one hand, was it all wrong? I don't know. We were creating a lot of international funds in creating monthly pay-per-views called as premium live events. In the pay-per-view universe, we had fixed venues. So we were making money off of them, just not enough or not as much as we'd like to. But, you know, when you're opposite De La Hoya the night before, well, if you can make a profit, all right.
Let's talk about the next big segment here on the show. The main event is Rhino and Sting one-on-one. Rhino gets a win after some interference. I don't know though. We got Sting losing right before the pay-per-view, where he could lose even if he doesn't lose the title, even if he doesn't lose the match. And even though we've had this uptick in viewers, because we're talking about, you know, on the way here, really two of the all-time best audiences.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really translate
At all.
So the prior month pay-per-view was 20,000 buys. The year prior, December of 2007, was 20,000 buys. This show only gets 10,000 buys. Now, Bruce Prichard often says, everybody's got a different excuse. Oh, that new gas station opened, silly shit like that.
Yeah.
But in reality, we know the main event Mafia are ratings draws. Did they just not want to see this lineup? Is it seasonal? But that can't be it because he had 20,000 the prior December. Or is it unbelievably Oscar De La Hoya and Pacquiao the night before?
First, I don't recall a pay-per-view ever being that low, but that's a whole nother argument. It was definitely down. And we trended, well, that gets into a whole nother thing. If I'm remembering pay-per-view revenues correctly, it sucked though. I'm going to go back to, you have to contribute some to the De La Hoya situation. I just think the simplicity of that. I also think December is an issue. It's that month, and you know, the WWE obviously had a monthly pay-per-view that was probably the week before ours, because I don't see them going into the third week of December. So my gut tells me the first Sunday of December would have been WWE. So we would have been the second Sunday of second Sunday of December. And so we're a week behind them. So there was just only so much money to go around. But at the end of the day, I'm going back to the number one decision would have been our format. They were tuning into the TV, but the pay-per-view, call it universe, prior to the Apple Wallet generation, that no telling how many people got a stream of it for free. And also the laborious process to buy a pay-per-view that doesn't exist today. It was just much more difficult on in-demand and Dish and not so much direct in Dish, but certainly the cable situation. It's like, oh, is it going to buy? And it was a mess.
Well, it is a mess. Let's talk about the pay-per-view. Before we do, I want to ask you, because Meltzer's sort of talking about, you know, what you're doing. Like, why as a fan would you spend $29.95 when you push everything for free on TV? He's basically saying most of the good stuff happens on TV in this company, not on pay-per-view. And we've talked with Eric about that before, decisions he made through the years, like Goldberg and Hogan being on Nitro and not a pay-per-view and what have you. Were you making more money from Spike than you were making on pay-per-view in this era? You had to be, right?
Absolutely. And remember, our business model, we also made fixed income. I'll just say this: fixed income on international pay-per-view. So whether there was no buys, it was, so we were only worried or concerned or gold in, I think Australia was an international market on pay-per-view, but the US and Canada to a lesser degree. But we were always fighting for that next contract. And if our ratings were to continue to go up, then the value of the product goes up. And that's the long ball win. So yes, we were making more money and our potential for it was more. And you know, going back to, hey, let's reduce pay-per-views and or figure that out. We were navigating our way through that. But yes, the TV money was always much more.
Well, let's talk about one of those multi-man matches we were talking about. Jay Lethal, Curryman, Hernandez, and Homicide win the 4 briefcases in the Feast or Fired. As a reminder, you got Motor City Machine Guns, LAX, Rock and Rave Infection, Black Machismo, Jay Lethal, The Guru, Sanjay Dutt, Maple Leaf Muscle, Petey Williams, BG James, Cute Kip, Consequences, Creed, Curryman, Shark Boy. They're all here. And it explains now. We know why they're all there, trying to get on the show and get a payday and stay on that treadmill, keep those checks coming. 2.5 stars from everybody. Afterwards, Borash is there. Lethal's going to open his briefcase and reveal it's a tag match. Sabin and Shelley are furious, and Borash says everybody knows the rules. They keep complaining. And Borash cuts a promo on Alex Shelley. That's right. Our pal, Jeremy Borash, cuts a promo on pay-per-view against Alex Shelley, calling him a total nonstop asshole. Boy, what a great line that is, and a cool pop. JB loved this, didn't he?
Marcus, you got to clip this. Conrad, I know you hadn't seen this. I would if you went through and spot checked and watched.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's fantastic.
I watched it over on the Impact app, and you can too. If you haven't seen this pay-per-view, you can watch this and all the great TNA moments when you sign up for the Impact app at impactwrestling.com/packages. Be sure to use our promo code Jeff. That's impactwrestling.com/packages. Be sure to use the promo code Jeff. The crowd was really into Feast or Fired. What did you think of those?
I just thought for a battle royal, it was a lot of people criticized it, but the rules of this one, 4 poles, 4 briefcases, and when you got a briefcase, you were out of the match. So it wasn't a elimination battle royal. It was once all 4 cases are captured, and you could keep a lot of action going on. Again, high dives and spots and everything that went with it. And the briefcases you can do, it is, look, is it a main event that should main event a pay-per-view? No. But is it a highly entertaining battle royal? Yes. And obviously you pointed out a way to get 16, 18 guys on there.
Next up, we've got ODB and Roxy teaming up with Taylor Wilde to take on Angelina Love, Velvet Sky, and Charmel. They go 7 minutes and 27 seconds. And the story is Charmel keeps running away whenever ODB is tagged in. Ultimately, Love is going to come off the top rope with a cross body, but Wilde rolls through for the pin. 1.5 stars from both the Observer and the Torch, 2 in a row as far as these stars go. Speaking of stars, I got to give you 5 stars across the board. I want to tell you about an amazing new app called Vita. They've created a new form of advertising that eliminates spam and allows everyone to get paid for their time and attention. You simply go to vida.io to download the Vita app and select a free second phone number. So you no longer have to worry about giving away your personal number. See, when a telemarketer calls your Vita number, they'll need to pay to get their message through. And the best part is the app is completely free. Brands are finally realizing the value of rewarding their customers for their time and attention, and our new sponsor, Crowd Health, is using it. And it's not only a fun way to support the show, but you can also earn some money in the process. So please try it out today by downloading the app at vita.io or by calling 509-WRESTLE. That's 509-WRESTLE. Follow that link you get, and man, you're all set. Thanks for supporting the show. By the way, that's vita.io, vida.io, or 509-WRESTLE, which is 509-973-7853. Call now, and you'll earn your first dollar just for downloading. That's 509-WRESTLE. So in our match 3 here, we've got Eric Young beating Sheik Abdul Bashir, apparently to win the the X title, but it's announced as held up later in the show. The match was fine. Meltzer would say the highlight was the referee Shane Sewell is going to have to start wrestling now and feuding with Bashir. He's got this 70s baby face thing down so well, and his ability to show fire could make him a headliner. He just has that guy on the street look. What do you think? You know, Sewell's even going to get some color here. Bashir's going to choke him with his turban. He's biting his head. Jim Cornette's going to come out, take the belt from him. The Observer gives it 2.5 stars. The Torch gives it a 1.75 stars. This is a hell of an angle, and it does feel like something that you didn't normally do with the X division. I liked it though. What did you think?
I love Shane. I got to work with him in Puerto Rico, and that's where the relationship started. Obviously, Dutch was a big part of that, but Shane in Puerto Rico, obviously as a Canadian, but as a baby face, glamour boy Shane, blonde hair. Shane, you know, there's guys that can be a good heel and good baby face or mechanical, this or that. Shane had a very, very sympathetic, likable personality with never doing a promo. And so we had him refereeing on TV to kind of slow tell the story. Bashir was a very good heel to do this. And this was a way, like you just said, it's a different avenue to get into a storyline, all storyline driven, just to, you know, to develop not just, you know, Shane at this stage of his career. He wasn't no young spring chicken, but Bashir, this is a way to get Bashir further established, heat on him, and progress his character, and just, I guess, in a lot of ways, move him up the ladder. I love this kind of story because you can't do it all the time, but it's a good way when you turn a referee into a active wrestler. There's already a sense of, if done correctly, is a real unique babyface nature, and it's just a way to get into it. We kind of got the belt held up out of this situation and story, but it just, I think I like it. And again, I'm going to go back to, like almost everything, it all comes down to the execution. You can write this and produce it and this and that. If Shane can't execute this, which we all had abundance of confidence in him getting it done, it was well done. It was compelling.
Christy Hemme is going to beat Awesome Kong by DQ in 5 minutes and 5 seconds. So Kong is going to keep the Knockouts title. Hemme's going to make a comeback after there's a bit of a run in here, and there's a big pull apart. It was laid out well, but a bad match according to Wade Keller. He gave it 1.25 stars. Dave liked it even less. He gave it 0.5 star. We know how great Awesome Kong was in the ring. We know that Gail Kim is no longer here. This is the Kong era of the Knockouts. Christy Hemme always worked hard. She has a fascinating story for professional wrestling, and even probably a better one that we can't talk about. But Awesome Kong, man, you got to have a TNA pay-per-view in this era without her. Just doesn't feel right. She's a major character on your show.
Hard to follow a Gail Kong, or Kong is so impressive and so dominating. You really had to build up your baby face. And Christy, her effort, she worked her ass off. Whatever she did, ring announcing, wrestling. But it was just kind of what we're pointing out, hard to follow the Gail Kong era.
Robert Roode and James Storm, we know them as Beer Money. They're going to beat Matt Morgan and Abyss to keep the tag straps in 11.5 minutes. It would say, or Wade would say, not the level of most of the recent Beer Money pay-per-view matches. Probably just because, you know, you got two big hulking monsters on the other side. 1.75 stars in the Observer, 2.25 stars in the Torch. It feels like Beer Money is really hitting their stride. I don't know that Abyss and Morgan were maybe the best tag team for them to show it, but did you feel like Beer Money was one of, if not the top tag team in the business at this time?
Yes. There was a time that I think they were the top tag team in the business. They just, they weren't bookends. And I've said that many times on here. When you have two guys come together that complement each other, as opposed to being kind of clones of each other, there's so much money in that. Going back to the territory days, you hear different single wrestlers put together. Like when Lawler and Dundee teamed up on occasion in the early days, you kind of look at the box offices that they drew, because you're kind of bringing together, in a lot of ways, I don't say both fan bases, but there's just kind of a magic to it. When you know, Bobby had his singles career, James had his tag and singles career, and just everything. When they came together and started clicking, there was a freshness, a coolness, a hipness. The merchandise was flying. Yeah, I think at one time during their peak, they were the best team in the business.
Did you hear the story that Rick lined him up once to talk to Johnny Ace?
Bring it.
Well,
I hadn't heard it.
As the story goes, when they both had an opportunity or their contracts were coming near, he lined up a conversation with Johnny Ace, and one or both of them, I forget, as Rick tells it, elected not to move forward with the meeting. But do you think Beer Money could have gotten over in WWE?
I actually do.
Yeah, I do too.
I really do. Yes. Almost a better chance as a package deal.
Yes. I know they both tried it separately, but together, I think it worked.
Yeah, for sure.
Saban and Shelley are going to come out and demand that Foley come out and overturn the decision. Instead, here comes Cornette. Shelley starts making fun of Cornette, daring him to hit him with a tennis racket or some other type of sporting equipment. Cornette says he's going to leave and get the baddest security guard around to throw those guys out, and they're laughing about it. And the lights go out, and Suicide flies to the ring on a zip line, just like Shawn Michaels did back at WrestleMania back in the day. Suicide, who's Frankie Kazarian here, is going to clean house on both guys and do like a DDT on both of them at the same time. And Meltzer would say Suicide is masked and covered up head to toe, something like Spider-Man, clearly a cartoon character for the kids. Up to this point, TNA didn't appear to have much interest in that age group. That, I'll be honest, makes a lot of sense if we're trying to appeal to kids. Have him zip line in, and he's got all these fantastic moves, and it does look a little Spider-Man like. But if it's really an act named for kids or created for kids, why the shit are we calling it Suicide?
He was a video game character. Is this the first time? Was this his debut?
Yes.
The first time he was on there?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think of so that would have been the summer as the game is being developed and talked about. I'm just trying to think back in the timeline that I was super excited about. We're going to have a video game character come to life. I think there's a ton of money in that even today. But yes, once he was named Suicide, we were kind of headed down that road, and just like you and a lot of others, like, okay, how is this kid's character? But it worked. I mean, it worked as a character, and I mean, the Suicide character stayed around for quite some time.
Kurt Angle is going to pin Rhino, so he's going to get a match with you on the January 11th show. It's noted in the newsletters that Rhino's not 100%. He was actually in the hospital just 2 nights prior to this. He had elevated blood pressure, and they would say when they were doing the write-up here that you could see he was struggling to keep his wind and keep up, but it was still a good match. And based on Mick Foley being the special enforcer, they think, hey, perhaps Kurt Angle is going to work with JArrett and then Foley next. Eventually, Angle's going to go for a chair shot. Foley tells him to put the chair down. Al Snow comes out, and the crowd pops for him, and they start chanting head. He's smiling because he's getting such a big reaction. Snow is going to slap Foley. And while this is going on, Angle nails Rhino with a chair shot, Olympic slam for the pin. Big story here, but Al Snow making the debut or the return, I don't know. But Al Snow and Foley, we all know, are friends, and now he's involved. Wade only gave it 2.5 stars. Dave liked it a little more, gave it 3.25. What can you tell us about Rhino being in the hospital and Al Snow coming out?
And look, I don't want to get into break any HIPAA laws. I knew though Rhino was having health issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was definitely something going on, but he got a clean bill. It went, but you know, no matter. Oh no, it mattered. I was going to say this. Rhino working with Kurt, that'll raise anybody's blood pressure and make anybody feel out of breath. I mean, you know, that just kind of comes with the territory. But he was cleared for sure. But he did have a health issue, a couple of them, off and on for a couple of months leading. You know, when he had his health issues, it didn't just happen that week. It goes back a few months. What was your next question?
About Al Snow.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Where did that go? We'll have to figure out on future podcasts, but I totally forgot about that. Totally forgot about Al making, and look, him and Mick go way, way back, but I totally forgot about him being introduced into the story.
It's time for the main event. I feel like I should do my best Mark Henry. It's time for the main event. Now remember, if if his team loses, the other team, whoever gets the fall, is now the world champion, not Sting. So Sting can lose the title in a multi-man match here.
Yeah,
It's Sting and Scott Steiner taking on Kevin Nash and Booker T. They're all together. They're the main event Mafia, and they're standing across the ring from AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, and Team 3D. All these guys have banded together, taking each other as tag team partners. And the title is on the line. If any member of the front line wins, Styles gets the title. And in 21-24, we finally have our victory, the main event Mafia win. Wade would say to me, the shock of this match was Nash. He hasn't worked this hard in 10 years. He's bumping up and down for everyone, particularly whenever he's doing whatever he's doing to make Joe look good and to make AJ's flying stuff work. They got heat on Devon early. He continues to break down the match, but Nash having his working boots on, it's not something a lot of people expected. And when it happened, people would heap the praise. Is it Nash being happy, being motivated? What do you think? I mean, critical praise here across the board for Kevin.
Well, he was engaged in the main event Mafia storyline. To me, it's that simple. He was highly engaged in it. I mean, look at that picture. Stinger's throwing his drop kick. There's just a lot of engagement. The ratings are up. The momentum. We all felt like we were doing something that we were having fun at. And I just always think that's paramount. You got to be engaged as a performer in enjoying what you're doing and the success of it. And again, you could just kind of feel that, okay, this feels right. AJ and Joe and those guys, the rivalry was, I hate to say real, but there was authenticity throughout, and Kevin got engaged with it.
We should also mention that there's a spot in here where everybody does all their big moves, like 3D hits the 3D on Booker. Nash is going to choke slam Bubba. Styles does the flying forearm on Nash. Joe's going for the muscle buster on Sting, but Nash gives Joe a low blow. Sting then pins Joe after a scorpion death drop. And there's a tease of Sting being unhappy with his partners after the match. Meltzer would say the match was a lot better than it looked on paper. Wade gave it 3 stars. Dave gave it 3.5 stars. It's a really good main event, even with the silly stip. Nash putting on a show. And this is really like your last big show of the year, because we're talking about sort of the end of 2008 here. You're more than 6 years into TNA at this point. Record high TV ratings, motivated top talent. I know Christian's leaving, but Kevin Nash is excited, and he's been to the mountaintop higher than most. Were you optimistic? Were you happy with the show? Were you happy with where TNA was at the end of 2008? Like, yes. I know you're the delusional optimist, but did it feel like this was at the time the high watermark for the entire company?
So and I've said this, privately a couple of different times and through, we did that on the Better Health, just in treatment and thoughts and all this kind of stuff. In 2007, Jill passed away, but from 2007 to 2009, that was the toughest personal part of my life. It was really hard. But professionally, it was at the very top of being the most rewarding. And there was a lot of, the international deals were coming. The live event business was growing. The ratings were growing. Our budgets were growing. The investor, the Carter family, were they tough? Well, hell yeah. And were they taking their money back, and rightly so, and all that? And that wasn't always easy, but it had been so hard for the first, let's say 3 years were really, really hard. And then you get a little traction, a little bit more traction. Well, by this time, we're showing revenue. Video game is out. Were we making gangbusters? No. Action figures, just all the different things. When you look at all the different revenue streams of a wrestling business, they were on the uptick. And so, yes, by the end of 2008, Conrad, I was very, very excited about the future of TNA in so many ways.
Let's do a few questions, then we'll put a button on this one. Eric wants to know, why did you guys do another Final Resolution pay-per-view the same year? He asked because you did it in January and then you did it in December.
So I laughed when I saw that because, man, I wish we would have had. I wish our man Danny Engler, or professionally known as Rudy Charles, or whoever, but the room, Vince, Dutch, I don't know exactly, Tanae, Demore, Jeremy, Bill Banks, and it was Conway. It'd flow from the years and all that, but it was always almost a Dixie. I'll just say this politely. Hey guys, do we want to go back to the drawing board and maybe rename some of these pay-per-views or maybe some change them around? And Dutch would say, this is an ongoing rib. Just tell us what you want as opposed to us trying to guess what you want. And so I think this was one of the things that logically, I think the room was, hey, Final Resolutions sounds more like a December pay-per-view than a January pay-per-view or whatever it may be. And so in one calendar year, I think this and one other that we had 2 in 1 year, I think, or maybe this was the only one, but that's how it happened, that we had moved it from a January to a December one. And this was the first year that we did that. I think
it is. Dylan wants to know, where would Jeff put the Main Event Mafia on the all-time factions list?
Depends on what the barometer is. You know, when you look at, like, if me and Conrad are sitting down, hypothetically speaking, I think me and you both are going to say, okay, we can talk all we want in circles, but let's talk about what generated the most revenue. And I don't think there's even a close second. I mean,
DX.
I think you could combine DX, Four Horsemen. I even think Bullet Club. And I don't know.
But NWO is number 1
by far on generating revenue. I mean, it's a top 10 t-shirt seller for 20 years. I mean,
and these days, in more recent eras, I know we don't talk about current stuff a bunch, the Bloodline, they got to be in the conversation.
In the NWO conversation?
Yeah, Jeff.
Interesting.
I mean, I'm just saying, realistically, we can slice it however we want, but you look at the high watermark for WCW, they never touched where WWE is right now. Now, if we're saying shirts, NWO's number 1 and it ain't close.
I'm saying revenue.
Yeah, I am too. I'm just saying, like, I know this is going to get some heat, and boy, send your hate tweets to, hey, it's Conrad. You could make an argument right now. Like, I want you to define top guy. What does top guy mean to you?
Create the most revenue. I would say sell tickets, but it's bigger than that. Create the most revenue.
So then Roman arguably is the top guy in the history of the business. Now, people get upset when you say that because they say, well, he's not there all the time. And, you know, guys don't draw anymore. And, well, I think you could look at Punk's merch sales in the last week and see that ain't true. But I'm just saying, like, if we're going to say revenue, then the Bloodline's in the conversation, whether we want to admit that or not. Now, I do think the defining thing that exists for Bullet Club and certainly existed for NWO is there's not like a signature Bloodline shirt. There's not like a defined, like the NWO shirt is now pop culture. And I know people say, oh, the DX shirt was too. No, it's not. It's not in the same conversation. Like, people are still wearing the NWO shirt now, today. It is one of the top sellers on the WWE shop website. The DX shirt is not. But like all these years later, the NWO is there. And you could argue on a much different level that the Bullet Club shirt helped propel some careers.
For sure.
And maybe contribute to the development of another company.
I was going to say, where do they in the recipe of AEW? I'm not disagreeing.
But it gets there. But I'm just saying the Bloodline, if we're going to just call it for what it is, because I got to say, even when the words fall out of my mouth, it's like, well, that can't be real. Like, it's definitely Austin. Well, Hogan, I've said this before, Hogan made Vince a millionaire. Austin made Vince a billionaire. But WWE revenue is higher than ever, and for better or worse, Roman is the guy with the big belt.
Okay, so here's where I'm saying faction. Individually, Hulk was huge.
Yes, yes.
Individually, Hall and Nash were pretty big. I'm not going to say,
Yeah.
I'm trying
They
to go.
weren't Hogan. Yeah, I agree.
NWO is above those three.
You're saying the NWO was bigger than Hulk Hogan by himself? Not in 96, but I'm saying like pop culture 85.
No.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I put Roman considerably above the bloodline as it like right when the NWO was formed. I put the NWO above Hogan right when they're formed.
Yeah.
And when you take Roman, he went from the big dog to the head of the table. I never thought the head of the table of the bloodline. I never looked at the bloodline over Roman. I've yet to look at that. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Well, when do you think the Bullet Club fell off? Have you pinpointed that? Like, I know it was hot when AJ was there. I know there was a lot of debate when Kenny Omega took it over, but I think that whole who's the leader, is it Kenny, is it Cody, the Bullet Club is fine, all that stuff was really enjoyable.
But is it? Well, you know better than I do, but to me, when AEW started and Matt and Nick were kind of pulled out of that, didn't the Bullet Club, I'm not saying cease to exist, but
when AEW became a thing, the Bullet Club was no longer at that level.
Yeah, to me,
it's a New Japan trademark, and I know they say it still exists to this day, but
yeah, and
kind of in name only. Nobody's talking about it.
Well, we're talking about peak, is I think.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going. I'm not discounting Bloodline at all. I just believe Roman is the box office attraction, not the Bloodline. Roman's bigger than the Bloodline. I'll say that.
And if we're going to be real specific, I don't think Roman is the biggest draw in the business.
It's a different era. I agree.
I mean, I think more than ever, it is the brand as a whole that draws it.
You ain't kidding.
And I think that was probably a deliberate decision that was made many years ago by Vincent Kennedy McMahon.
I could not agree more.
Because, like, if you're paying attention to WrestleTix and you see how WrestleMania tickets are selling, and we ain't even close to knowing what's going to main event. Like night one, a lot of people think they know what night two is, but night one, almost 60,000 tickets sold, and we have no clue what the main event is.
So let me ask you something. Question. In the territory days, the business was designed. Lawler's hot. Dusty's hot.
Yes.
Fritz is hot. That was the business model. Get a guy hot. When Vince said, I'm putting my flag in the ground, and I got Hogan, Hogan, Savage, and all this. I believe Vince had the mindset then, because if it's not good for the WWF, it's not good for anyone. He had that mantra the first time I ever met him. I don't think he thought about that in 98 or 99 or 2002. Or I think he's thought that since the day he went national.
And a great example of that, I just heard from Bruce not too long ago. We didn't ask Bruce anything. And it was a great question that I have to admit, I didn't even pay a lot of attention to. But way back in that Hogan era, when you're talking about going national, I didn't even realize this. They never referred to the big belt as the world championship. It was always the WWF champion.
Yes.
The idea being there are a million Tom, Dick, and Harry promotions who can say this is our world champion. And you get lost in sort of that alphabet soup on, say, the boxing world. Oh, I'm the AWA champion. I'm the ECW world champion. I'm the WCW world champion. I'm the NWA world champion. Lots of people can claim to be a world champion, but only one person can claim to be the WWF champion. The idea that Vince saw that right away and realized that everyone else can call their performers wrestlers. We don't have that. We have WWF superstars. It's little nuanced stuff like that made a lot of sense. And I know we as wrestling fans and just as a community, we like to sort of poke fun at some of Vince's idiosyncrasies where he gets upset with a sneeze or I mean, I even saw Pat McAfee on College Game Day this weekend when they showed the Undertaker running around with a title belt. That's not a belt. You use a belt to hold your pants up. That's a title, and that's what they're playing for today in Texas. Blah blah blah.
I heard it.
I know people like to make fun of that and poke fun and look at it, and it's sort of tongue in cheek. But man, he did set himself apart. He saw it. He stuck with it. And Bruce used to say that sometimes Vince would say things like, I don't know if fans will believe that. And apparently Vince would pull his glasses down to the end of his nose and say, they'll believe it when they see it. And that level of confidence is what made, and the approach to the business is what made Vince so successful.
I love this kind of conversation. There's also, and look, it'll probably be another generation past us, Conrad, but I think when we look back, and because things then become second nature.
Yes.
It's people get so wrapped up in booking and finishes and angles and turns and look, I'm not discounting it, and I don't believe Vince ever discounted it, but Vince always looked black ink versus red ink. And so that was his priority. So what was his priority? Branding, marketing. He cared about booking, but he never desired that to be the end all be all, or even developing talent. He's all about branding. Hulkamania, I'm going to sell shirts and brand that. And Stone Cold, he's a branding, marketing. You kind of look at that's why I'm getting outside of wrestling. It's something. You kind of look at the Shield, the NFL. My goodness, the ratings that they're, it's just amazing the ratings that are coming in on NFL and the Shield. And what have they done? They've gone out of their way over and above. You protect those good quarterbacks with your life.
Yes.
Because they drive the league.
Yes.
Kind of look at that. You go, oh, okay, I get it. That it's all about revenue. Well, you can't even touch a quarterback. You're right.
Listen, don't act like David Stern didn't have a personal relationship with Michael Jordan. As Michael Jordan goes, so does the NBA. I mean, those referees knew, listen, traveling's a foul unless 23 does it, and then it's fine.
It's fine. Conrad, you're the best.
It's sort of like when some wrestlers don't have to use a tag rope and say, I'm just saying, like in Mexico, nobody's tagging in and tagging out.
Oh, it's
they understand. Let's not get bogged down in what the rule book says. We're trying to entertain people. And so that lucha fast-paced wrestling that they do in CMLL and AAA and all that, like, I understand wanting to be a stickler for the rules and it's old school and we're pretending and we're suspending our disbelief. But at the same time, we're trying to create moments. And that's what the NFL is trying to do. And that's hard to do with a true freshman quarterback starting in a championship game where the Panthers play, coming out to pyro and smoke and throwing for 55 yards against number 16.
Oh, boy.
Had we protected that quarterback,
everything goes full circle.
FSU's in at number 3, automatic. Like the question should have never been, is FSU 4? FSU should have been 3 had they had a quarterback.
So Conrad, I'm starving. I started this anyway. I got to go eat. I got to ask you this though. You've got me so hyped. I can't wait to watch the semifinals and the finals. But can you tell me one more time, when does Georgia play Florida State?
Georgia is going to waffle stomp Florida. I think it's on December 23rd.
Not the 23rd.
In Miami.
Not the 23rd. 5 and 6 that early? No, it's got to be after Christmas. New Year's.
Yeah, you're right. December 30th. It's a week later.
Okay.
My bad. Instead of Christmas Eve, it's not right before Christmas Eve. It's right before New Year's Eve. So yes, December 30th. And I'm going to be glued to a television and I'm going to have a great time. I don't know if you've seen this, but since you and I have been recording, lots of talking heads in college football are suggesting, including your great close personal friend, the Disco Inferno.
Oh no.
That FSU should just boycott and no show the game.
Go right ahead.
Can you imagine how stupid that would be? nobody would ever spend any money with that university ever again. You've lost all faith and confidence, ruined all sponsorship. I mean, it'd be the worst thing for that promotion, but it is the only way to keep that undefeated streak intact.
Best thing they can do is go down there and whip Georgia. That cures all.
Whip Georgia.
That ain't gonna happen, but that's the best thing they can do. I'm telling you.
If you watched Alabama, Georgia, and then you watched Florida State, Louisville, it felt like you watched an NFL game and then a high school championship.
Let's call it a wrap, pal. I'm still.
I cannot wait to see those Florida State real national championship shirts like University of South Florida had that nobody gave a shit about, because that's what's coming. By the way, if you'd like to buy some shirts that everybody loves, they're available now at boxofgimmicks.com. You can even get the now infamous Last Outlaw t-shirt, and there's like a whole skunk Nintendo game deal. We got lots of fun stuff over there just in time for Christmas. And if you order now, it will make it in time for Christmas. But you don't have to wait till Christmas for our next show. We're going to be finally talking about some of those crazy gimmick matches that have happened in TNA. That's coming your way next week here on the program. Of course, you get all these shows early and ad-free, including being a part of our live studio audience. Want to give a shout out to Darren and Bobby and Leon and Mouthpiece Murphy and Coach Rosie and everybody who hung out with us here on a Sunday. Adfreeshows.com is the ultimate Christmas gift for the friend in your life, and it's a gift to yourself. You get to have personal interaction with some of your favorite podcast hosts, like you're doing live Q&As plus bonus content every single month. And by the way, if your business targets men that are 25 to 54 years old, no better place to advertise than right here. You hear some of the same sponsors year after year, and that's because it really works. Find out how affordable it can be to get those dudes looking at your product or service at advertisewithjarrett.com. If you've got a question for us, we'd love to have your interaction. It's at MyWorldPod on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And the cheapest, easiest, best way to support the show is to check us out on YouTube. That's MyWorld on YouTube.com. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. And Jeff, we'll be back next week talking about crazy stip matches.
I cannot wait. I can't wait to hear you say, now, Jeff, let me get this straight. Did you really? No. Anyway, we're going to have a lot of fun. Always a good time.
Coming your way sooner rather than later, right here on My World.
Peace.